Chapter 2973. The core disciples of the Blood Sword sect lived in the Blood Sword sacred ground. There were more than 600 disciples, dozens of deacons, and a few elders. They had all cultivated the divine abilities and secret arts of the Blood Sword sect and had received the divine Tao true inheritance. There were also 3,000 odd workers who did not have the right to live on the sacred mountain. In the dark red earth and mountains around the sacred mountain, a large number of buildings had been constructed for the workers to live and work in. It was currently nighttime. The dragon blood forbidden land was completely silent, and the cold wind howled. At the peak of the sacred mountain, in a certain majestic and domineering palace, there was a spacious and dazzling secret room. A handsome god race member with a head full of white hair and wearing a black robe was sitting cross-legged in a dark red pool of blood. This god race member was handsome and bewitching, and he looked young. His face was white and translucent, and he had a pair of elf-like pointy ears. On his forehead, there was a lifelike mark of a blood sword. A ball of dark red and purple blood light enveloped him. It flickered and flickered continuously, emitting a frighteningly powerful aura. His eyes were tightly shut as he sat there quietly, as if he was in a deep sleep. However, the dark red blood in the pool of blood was constantly boiling, increasing his strength. At this moment, a voice sounded from outside the door of the secret room. "Sect Master, there's news from the Northern Plains branch." The person who spoke was a muscular old man with a head full of purple hair. He wore a purple robe and had a dark golden belt around his waist. The old man wore a luxurious golden crown, and his eyes and face were filled with the vicissitudes of life. He gave off a noble and dignified aura. He was a high god lord who had been famous for many years, the vice sect master of the Blood Sword sect, Yanhua. Although the white-haired god race member in the secret room looked younger and more handsome, that was because the sect master had cultivated a divine ability and secret art that made him look like that. The sect master's actual age was far greater than Yanhua's, and his strength was greater as well. After a while, the white-haired sect master of the Blood Sword sect slowly opened his eyes. His purple eyes were emotionless as he asked in a deep voice, "What's the result?" Outside the secret room, Yanhua bowed slightly and replied, "The Northern Plains branch has been completely destroyed, including the teleportation array. God Lord Black Flame and the disciples guarding the branch have all been killed. The two God Lords that had rushed over from the Sea Forest Commandery to reinforce them have also been killed." The sect master of the Blood Sword sect's expression finally changed. He frowned and asked in an even deeper tone, "It's impossible for an elder of the Blood Blade sect to do this. Who did it personally?" "Sect master of the Blood Sword. Tianxing." "It's him again." Sect Master Blood Sword narrowed his eyes as a cold glint flashed through his eyes. "This kid's strength is actually so strong that even Black Flame is not his match?" Yanhua was silent for a while before he nodded and said, "According to Great Elder's investigation at the scene, Tianxing should also be a Sir God, and he is stronger than Sir God Black Flame." The sect master of the Blood Sword sect remained silent, his eyes flashing with a cold light. Yanhua thought for a moment before continuing, "Two guests of the Heavenly Unity sect have been killed. This subordinate didn't dare to report this to the Heavenly Unity sect in order to avoid conflict. Sect Master, please make the decision." The sect master of the Blood Sword sect said indifferently, "Those two guests have been domineering in the Heavenly Unity sect for a long time. They've received a lot of benefits, but they haven't contributed much. Even if they've been killed, the Heavenly Unity sect won't be so angry. Just report it as it is." Yanhua hurriedly agreed and sneered, "This subordinate will report it as it is. The two guests of the Heavenly Unity sect have been killed, and their reputation has been damaged. They definitely won't let Tianxing off. Perhaps the Heavenly Unity sect will kill that brat without us doing anything." The experts of the Blood Sword sect had died one after another, and their strength had been depleted. However, they had to kill Ji Tianxing. Yanhua didn't want to do it himself, so he wanted to borrow someone else's knife. It would be best if the experts of the Heavenly Unity sect stepped in. Unexpectedly, the sect master of the Blood Sword sect frowned and coldly reprimanded, Absurd! That brat has a blood feud with our sect, so it should be our sect that kills him. If we have to rely on the Heavenly Unity sect for such a small matter, won't our sect lose all face and be ridiculed for being incompetent? How could an incompetent sect share the Lord's burdens and solve his problems? How can our Lord stand tall and cooperate with the Heavenly Unity sect on equal terms? Yan Hua's body trembled, and his expression became somewhat unsightly. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Sect Master is right. This subordinate's thinking is too simple." After a pause, he continued, "Since we can't rely on the Heavenly Unity sect for this matter, we can only take revenge ourselves. And the sooner, the better. The longer we delay, the more our sect's prestige will be damaged. How about this? This subordinate will gather 2 elders and 3 reverends to go to Hailin County to kill that brat." Yan Hua volunteered, wanting to kill Ji Tianxing as quickly as possible. However, the forces he could mobilize were the 3 elders and 3 reverends. These were the only 6 mid-level divine lords left in the Bloodsword sect. The Grand Elder had to guard the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground and could not leave. Therefore, the helpers that Yan Hua could bring with him were only 2 elders and 3 consecrators. The Bloodsword sect master coldly rejected, "There's no need to rush. Don't be impatient. Our sect has tried to kill that brat several times, but we've failed time and time again. Every time, we thought we understood him well enough and found out his strength and background. However, when the operation began, we discovered that his strength and methods exceeded our expectations. Even now, we still haven't seen through his background." Yan Hua was shocked and said in disbelief, "Sect Master, you mean that brat's strength is not only above Divine Lord Black Flame, but even stronger?" The Blood Sword sect master nodded slightly and said solemnly, "Of course. He can kill Black Flame in a short time, kill thousands of people, and flatten the entire Northern Plains branch. From this, it can be seen that his true strength is above yours, and he can even stand shoulder to shoulder with me." Yan Hua's eyes widened in shock. How is this possible?" The Blood Sword sect master ignored him and continued, "Most importantly, this brat is extremely scheming and ruthless. He's extremely difficult to deal with. If it were any other divine lord, they would have factions, family, and friends to tie them down. Our sect can use all sorts of schemes and start with the people around him. We can always find his weakness and force him to submit. However, this Tianxing has always been a loner. Even the factions he's come into contact with are only casual acquaintances and don't have deep relationships. This way, we don't even have the conditions to threaten him. That brat has no weakness at all. He's simply invulnerable. The only way to get rid of him was to use all of his strength and crush him to death with an unstoppable force. We can't leave any leeway, or else he might be able to escape death." End of chapter. Chapter 2974. Yan Hua nodded in agreement at Sect Master Bloodsword's words. He thought for a moment and understood what Sect Master Bloodsword meant. Soon after, a look of deep shock appeared on his face as he said in disbelief, "Sect Master, could it be that you want to?" Sect Master Bloodsword nodded and said in a serious tone, "Send people to keep an eye on his whereabouts and mobilize 2 elders, 3 reverends, and a large number of disciples. Use all the forces we can mobilize to set up a trap at the border between Hailin County and Xianxia County. I will come out of seclusion in 5 days and meet up with all of you. We can only succeed in this battle. Failure is not an option." Yan Hua could feel the sect master's determination. His spirits were lifted and he bowed solemnly. "This subordinate obeys. Don't worry, sect master. This battle concerns the reputation and future of our sect. This subordinate will do his best. If the plan fails, this subordinate is willing to commit suicide." Sect Master Bloodsword said indifferently, "If the plan fails, you will definitely die on the spot. How will you have the chance to commit suicide?" Yan Hua's body stiffened, and he nodded again. "This subordinate understands. This subordinate will go and make the arrangements now." After saying that, Yan Hua turned and left. Within the secret room, Sect Master Bloodsword slowly closed his eyes. The Bloodsword symbol on his forehead flickered with scarlet light and killing intense soared into the sky. The blood sword that has been sealed for 1,000 years is about to come out of its sheath and drink blood. Sect Master Blood Sword muttered to himself in a cold and sinister tone. In the next few days, the atmosphere in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land became extremely tense and solemn. The entire Xianxia County was filled with undercurrents and killing intent. Sect Master Blood Sword was the local tyrant of this county. Everyone, from the county lords to the various factions, obeyed Sect Master Blood Sword's orders. The various factions received Sect Master Blood Sword's orders and sent their elites and experts to the vast mountain range at the border. The vast mountain range was located at the border between Lin County and Xianxia County. It was a mountain range with a circumference of 1,000,000 miles and was covered in dense forests. The mountains were high and treacherous. The experts of the various factions didn't know the goal of the vast mountain range. They didn't know what mission they were going to carry out or what dangers they would face. However, the various factions guessed that this mission was definitely going to be a big one. The target of the Blood Sword sect was definitely a peak power. Some well-informed forces knew that the Blood Blade sect had been attacking the Blood Sword sect recently. Therefore, everyone thought that the Blood Sword sect's goal was to ambush the Blood Blade sect. A few days later, in the vast mountain range, there were over 4,000 Heaven God experts and over 20 Sur God experts gathered. Most of these experts were from Xianxia County, and some were from Lin County. Even the second elder, third elder, and 3 reverends of the Blood Sword sect had personally come to the mountain range to instruct the experts to set up traps and formations. For a time, the boundless mountain range was filled with figures and murderous auras. Even the demonic beasts and divine beasts living in the mountain range felt a strong sense of danger and migrated and fled. On this day, Ji Tianxing was riding on the Black Dragon, flying near the Lin prefectural city. In the evening, a spiritual light suddenly flew from the horizon and landed in front of him. The spiritual light dissipated, revealing a communication jade slip. Ji Tianxing ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. He picked up the communication jade slip and frowned as soon as he read it. It was a message from the Blood Blade sect's left emissary Jean. The content was as follows. Young Master Tianxing, a few days ago, you destroyed the Northern Plains branch and killed Sir God Black Flame, dealing a heavy blow to the Blood Sword sect. This matter dealt a great blow to the Blood Sword sect's power and reputation, which made us excited. However, in the past few days, our sect's spies have discovered that there are undercurrents in the Lin and Xianxia counties. The Blood Sword sect has issued a secret order to gather a large number of experts in the mountain range. Even the 2 elders and 3 reverends of the Blood Sword sect have come out in full force to personally oversee the situation in the mountain range. Although our sect's spies haven't found out the exact plan of the Blood Sword sect, there are rumors in the pugilistic world that the Blood Sword sect is doing this to ambush us. However, our sect's most recent target is the Blood Sword sect's branch in the other 2 counties. Therefore, I suspect that the Blood Sword sect's target is you. However, I find it hard to believe that the Blood Sword sect would actually go all out in full force to deal with you. I hereby send you a message to remind you to take a detour and avoid entering the vast mountain range. After reading the message, Ji Tianxing put away the jade slip and a cold smile appeared on his face. As I expected, the Blood Sword sect can't sit still anymore. Ji Tianxing had long expected that the Blood Sword sect would have such a reaction. This also proved that the Blood Sword sect's experts had withered and their strength was empty. They were already at the end of their rope. I just broke through to the 3rd layer a few days ago. It's a good opportunity to practice on the Blood Sword sect. Ji Tianxing sneered and began to reply to left emissary Jean. I had long expected that the Blood Sword sect's strength would be empty. They would definitely gather all their strength and release their strongest attack to deal with me. For this monarch, this is undoubtedly a great danger, but it is also an excellent opportunity. Knowing that there are tigers on the mountain, I still want to go there. I will pass through the mountain range as usual and have a decisive battle with the Blood Sword sect. If I can finish this battle in one go, it would be for the best. Even if I can't obtain a complete victory, I can still heavily injure the Blood Sword sect. After that, the Blood Blade sect will do their best to follow me into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and complete the mission. Ji Tianxing wrote these words on the jade slip and sent it out. After an hour, left emissary Jin did not reply. Ji Tianxing guessed that this matter was too serious for left emissary Jin to make a decision. After another 15 minutes, left emissary Jin finally replied. His tone was very solemn and filled with deep anxiety. Young Master Tianxing, the Blood Sword sect has already set up an inescapable net in the vast mountain range. You must not go there. Moreover, our sect has just received a piece of news. The Blood Sword sect's master has said that he will leave seclusion and head to the vast mountain range to invite you to meet him there. When the time comes, he will have a public duel with you to determine victory and defeat. If you lose to him, you can either commit suicide or submit to the Blood Sword sect. If he loses to you, the Blood Sword sect will disband and no longer be your enemy. This is clearly a provocation. The Blood Sword sect's master wants to trick you into going to the vast mountain range and then gather all his forces to attack you. According to our sect's understanding of the Blood Sword sect's master, this person is sinister and ruthless. He will stop at nothing and is definitely not a straightforward and upright person. You must not be fooled and must not believe his words. As a precaution, young Master Tianxing, please hurry to Hailin City as soon as possible. I, the right emissary, and the vice sect master will meet up with you as soon as possible. Evidently, left emissary Jin was worried that Ji Tianxing would be too conceited and really head to the vast mountain range to fight the Blood Sword sect's master. In order to prevent this from happening, he did not hesitate to drag the right emissary and the vice sect master to personally protect and persuade Ji Tianxing. Chapter 2975. Ji Tianxing could empathize with left emissary Jin's anxiety and worry. After all, he had already killed several experts of the Blood Sword sect. Even Sir God Black Flame, an upper-level Sir God, was killed by him. In the eyes of the Blood Sword sect and the Blood Blade sect, he was a genuine upper-level Sir God. The Blood Blade sect valued him more and more and treated him as their strongest ally. How could they let anything happen to him? Ji Tianxing held the jade slip and thought for a moment before replying to left emissary Jin. I've arrived at Hailin County City. I'll be waiting for you at the unnamed villa in the southern suburbs. After sending the message, he let the Black Dragon turn around and fly to Hailin County City. An hour later, the Black Dragon arrived at the southern suburbs of the county city and landed on the top of a mountain. On the lush green mountain, there was an old and dilapidated villa called the Unnamed Villa. A few hundred years ago, this place was once prosperous and bustling with activity. But now, the villa was dilapidated and covered with moss and vines. Many of the houses and palaces had collapsed. Ji Tianxing put the Black Dragon into the Divine Pagoda and stood alone on a dilapidated palace, quietly watching the sunset. After waiting for about an hour, night fell. A purple light flew from the direction of the county city and arrived at the unnamed villa as fast as lightning. Swoosh! The purple light dissipated and 3 figures appeared. The leader was a burly and dignified golden-robed man. He was left emissary Jin. Next to him was a stooped purple-robed elder with a blood dragon walking stick. He was the right emissary of the Blood Blade sect. As for the blurry figure behind them, it was both a man and a divine beast. He was the deputy sect leader. After the two sides met, left emissary Jin let out a sigh of relief and saluted first. Greetings, young Master Tianxing. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and asked, Left emissary Jin, why don't you introduce these two? Left emissary Jin pointed to the purple-robed elder beside him and introduced, This is the right emissary of our sect, Blood Dragon Elder. Then, he pointed at the illusory figure behind him and said, This is our sect's vice sect master, the famous Sir God Blood Illusion. The Blood Dragon Right Ambassador and Sir God Blood Illusion nodded at Ji Tianxing. Although they were seniors who had been famous for many years, they treated Ji Tianxing as equals and did not dare to slight him. After all, in the divine world, strength was the only thing that mattered. After the two sides greeted each other, left emissary Jin waved his hand and formed a divine formation that enveloped the entire unnamed villa. As a result, everything in the villa was isolated. The meeting and secret conversation between the three of them would not be discovered by the outside world. Left Envoy Jin said with a complicated expression, "Young Master Tianxing, the Blood Sword sect seems to have been forced into a corner. That's why they're so impatient, wanting to get rid of you as soon as possible. I'm extremely worried that you've fallen for the Blood Sword sect's sect master's trap and really gone to the Boundless Mountain Range to fight him. That guy wasn't some famous senior. He never kept his word and didn't care about his reputation. Therefore, we hurriedly rushed over from the headquarters to discuss countermeasures with you face to face." Ji Tianxing knew that the headquarters of the Blood Sword sect was in a certain county in the south, tens of millions of li away from here. To rush over from the headquarters of the Blood Sword sect, they must have used a teleportation formation and passed through several counties. Therefore, he said with a smile, "You must have paid a price of several billion divine stones to rush over this time, right?" Left Envoy Jin smiled embarrassedly and said somewhat awkwardly, "We've made a fool of ourselves in front of you, young Master Tianxing. We were also worried about your safety." The Blood Dragon Rite Ambassador hurriedly explained, "Young Master Tianxing, our sect treats you as our most reliable ally. We have great trust and regard you highly. As long as we can ensure your safety, spending several billion divine stones is nothing. After all, the value of an ally like you is immeasurable." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "All right, let's not talk about these pleasantries. Tell me about your plan." This time, Left Envoy Jin and Blood Dragon Rite Ambassador remained silent. The blurry Sir God Blood illusion opened his mouth and said, "Young Master Tianxing, our plan has progressed to this point and victory is already in our grasp. We've already uprooted 10 of the Blood Sword sect's branches. Nearly half of the Blood Sword sect's Sir God experts have also been killed by you. We only need to carry out the plan step by step and don't need to fight the Blood Sword sect head-on. Therefore, we would like to invite you to our sect's headquarters and stay there for a while. On the day of the final battle, we'll charge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land together and destroy the Blood Sword sect in one fell swoop." Ji Tianxing knew that the Blood Sword sect was ranked last among the 6 great sects and had the shallowest foundation. Moreover, the other sects had been roped in by the royal family. Only the Blood Sword sect had no one to rely on. Therefore, the Blood Sword sect was anxious to gain a foothold and expand their influence. Only by seizing the opportunity to destroy the Blood Sword sect and replace it could they quickly strengthen the Blood Sword sect. However, the Blood Sword sect's foundation was weak and they could not advance with their movement techniques. They could only fight steadily and surely. This was why they valued him so much and were unwilling to take risks. However, the Blood Sword sect's plan did not match Ji Tianxing's thoughts. He shook his head and said, "I can understand your sect's stability. However, this is too much of a waste of time. I'm not willing to wait that long." Left Emissary Jin immediately became anxious and asked worriedly, "Young Master Tianxing, you're not thinking of going to the Misty Mountain Range to fight the sect master of the Blood Sword sect to the death, right?" Ji Tianxing shook his head again and sneered, "Ha! If the sect master of the Blood Sword sect does not say so, I'm prepared to go to the Misty Mountain Range. Since he has already done so, wouldn't it be foolish for me to go to the Misty Mountain Range?" Left Emissary Jin furrowed his brows in doubt. "Then you mean," Ji Tianxing pointed to the south and said with a smile, "the Blood Sword sect's forces are all concentrated in the Misty Mountain Range. Isn't this the best opportunity for us to attack the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land?" Left Emissary Jin, Blood Dragon Rite Emissary, and God Monarch Blood Illusion were all stunned and revealed deep shock. "What? So fast? Young Master Tianxing, please reconsider." Young Master Tianxing, the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land is the headquarters of the Blood Sword sect after all, and its defenses are extremely powerful. Furthermore, I'm certain that the sect master of the Blood Sword sect is definitely in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. When you enter the Misty Mountain Range, he will leave the headquarters and fight with you. The 3 God Monarchs all felt that Ji Tianxing's decision was too reckless and risky. However, Ji Tianxing was stubborn and said with a calm expression, "According to your plan, it will take at least 3 to 5 months to destroy the Blood Sword sect. That's too slow. I can't wait that long. I'll deal with the Blood Sword sect in half a month. Tonight, we'll head to Shanyang County and attack the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. My target is the sect master of the Blood Sword sect. I'll leave the rest of the small fries to you. God Monarch Blood Illusion and Left Emissary Jean were hesitant and wanted to dissuade him. Ji Tianxing said with a solemn tone, I've already made up my mind. You don't need to say any more. If you can't make up your mind, ask the sect master now. If the Bloodblade sect is not willing to cooperate, then our cooperation will end here and I'll go alone. Chapter 2976. Since Ji Tianxing had already said so much, Yi Zichen didn't hesitate. The Blood Illusion God Monarch, Gold Left Emissary, and Blood Dragon Right Emissary all remained silent, not knowing what to say. The three divine monarchs looked at each other and secretly communicated with each other. Isn't this brat too domineering and overbearing? The Blood Illusion God Monarch was somewhat dissatisfied. Gold Left Emissary said with a bitter smile, It's natural for a monstrous genius like him to be arrogant and conceited. After all, he hasn't tasted defeat since he appeared in front of our sect. The Blood Dragon Right Emissary said with a bitter tone, But we all know that those old foxes of the Blood Sword sect aren't so easy to deal with. We've fought with the Blood Sword sect for 1,000 years and haven't gained much of an advantage. If young Master Tianxing rushes into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground so recklessly, I'm afraid we'll suffer a great loss. Gold Left Emissary hesitated for a moment and said, But young Master Tianxing's attitude is firm. We can't go against it, or we'll lose this ally. Apart from him, we haven't met such a powerful ally for several hundred years. Don't worry, I'll communicate with him again. If it really doesn't work, I'll ask the sect master to make a decision. The Blood Illusion God Monarch and Blood Dragon Right Emissary both expressed their agreement. Gold Left Emissary bowed to Ji Tianxing and said in a serious tone, Young Master Tianxing, we've known each other for so long and I have some understanding of your nature. Although I don't know why you're not willing to wait and are in such a hurry to destroy the Blood Sword sect. But I believe that since you've made this decision, you have the corresponding confidence and assurance, right? Ji Tianxing glanced at him and said in an indifferent tone, Get to the point. Gold Left Emissary nodded and said in a serious tone, Since that's the case, I'll be blunt. I believe that you have enough confidence and assurance, but our sect has fought with the Blood Sword sect for nearly 1,000 years and has never been able to gain the upper hand. The schemes of the Blood Sword sect's sect master and vice sect master Yanhua are not as simple as you and I see. We hope to fight steadily, gradually weakening the Blood Sword sect's strength, and finally kill our way into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground and completely destroy the Blood Sword sect. If you directly charge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land, you'll probably be ambushed by the Blood Sword sect. The sect master's strength was unfathomable. In particular, his sect guardian treasure, the Dark Death Blood Sword that originated from the ancient times, was even more powerful. That blood sword hasn't appeared in the world for 1,000 years. We don't even know to what extent it's been nurtured. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said in the same solemn tone, What you said, this monarch has considered. In fact, this monarch thinks further than you and considers more factors. However, I've decided to take advantage of this opportunity to charge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and eradicate the Blood Sword sect. So what if there was an ambush in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land? Even if this was a trap, those experts in the vast mountain range had built a teleportation formation to connect to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. When we killed our way into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land, they all rushed back to support us, causing us to be surrounded. Even if the situation is so bad, this monarch is still confident. Leave the Blood Sword sect's sect master and vice sect master Yanhua to me. The three elders and guardians, as well as the experts invited by the Blood Sword sect, will all be dealt with by the Blood Blade sect. Is there a problem? This Left Emissary Jean immediately fell silent, not daring to reply. The shock in his heart set off perilous waves. Yes, Ji Tianxing had thought further and more thoroughly than he had. Before thinking about victory, he had already considered defeat. He had thought of the worst outcome in advance. However, in this situation, Ji Tianxing was still confident that he could kill the two strongest experts of the Blood Sword sect. Did the Blood Blade sect have any reason to refuse? After a long while, Left Emissary Jin nodded slightly. If you can kill the Blood Sword sect's sect master and Yanhua, then there's naturally no problem. The sect master will personally take action, along with God Monarch Blood Illusion, the Blood Dragon Rite Emissary, and myself, as well as 5 elders and 2 guardians. In addition, our sect can also invite 10 God Monarchs to help. With all the strength of our sect, we can naturally kill the experts of the Blood Sword sect. Ji Tianxing nodded. Since that's the case, what are you hesitating for? Send a message to the sect master now and ask him to make a decision. Left Emissary Jin hesitated for a moment before taking a deep breath and nodding. Okay, please wait a moment, young Master Tianxing. After saying that, he took out a special purple jade slip and sent a message. When the message flew into the night sky and disappeared, he frowned and waited for a reply. God Monarch Blood Illusion and the Blood Dragon Rite Emissary were also nervous and apprehensive. Left Emissary Jin had reported Ji Tianxing's decision and the pros and cons of the matter to the sect master in detail. However, the 3 of them were still worried that the sect master might reject this request and reject Ji Tianxing's suggestion. If that happened, the cooperation between the 2 sides would break down and they would have to part ways. Even if the Blood Blade sect had already obtained victory and weakened the strength of the Blood Sword sect. However, without Ji Tianxing's help, the Blood Blade sect still did not have much confidence. It had only been an hour. However, for Left Emissary Jin and the others, it seemed extremely long and torturous. Finally, the Blood Blade sect's sect master replied. A spiritual light flew over from the horizon and landed in Left Emissary Jin's hand. God Monarch Blood Illusion and the Blood Dragon Rite Emissary's gazes immediately gathered on his hand. Left Emissary Jin took a deep breath and held the purple jade slip with both hands to read its contents. The Blood Blade sect's sect master's voice immediately sounded in his mind. It was crisp, decisive, and dignified. I am already aware of young Master Tianxing's decision. After careful consideration, I have finally made up my mind to grasp this opportunity and gamble with him. I have fought with the Blood Sword sect for 1,000 years without any results. My accumulated anger cannot be dispelled. If this operation succeeds, please tell young Master Tianxing to let me deal with the Blood Sword sect's sect master. Even if I have to whip his corpse, I will take revenge for that sword strike. The tone of the last sentence was cold and murderous. Obviously, the Blood Blade sect and the Blood Sword sect had a blood feud. There was also a great personal grudge between the Blood Blade sect and the Blood Sword sect's sect master. After Left Emissary Jin finished reading the contents of the jade slip, he did not immediately tell Ji Tianxing. Instead, he passed the jade slip to God Monarch Blood Illusion and the Blood Dragon Rite Emissary for them to read. After the 2 of them finished reading the jade slip, the 3 of them looked at each other in disbelief. The sect master actually agreed? Perhaps the sect master is wise and knows the pros and cons of this, so he decided to gamble with young Master Tianxing? Moreover, the grudge between the sect master and the Blood Sword sect's sect master has been accumulating for 1,000 years. The sect master's hatred for the Blood Sword sect's sect master is deeply rooted in his bones. As long as he can take revenge, he has to try even if he has to take the risk. Left Emissary Jin and the Blood Dragon Rite Emissary were even more convinced by God Monarch Blood Illusion's words. They both nodded in agreement. Afterwards, Left Emissary Jin bowed to Ji Tianxing and said, "Young Master Tianxing, after careful consideration, the sect master has agreed to your proposal and is willing to cooperate with you. From the beginning to the end, we have been the staunchest of allies. We are bound together for good or ill. I hope that this risky operation will be successful." End of chapter. Chapter 2977. The master of the Blood Blade sect agreed to Ji Tianxing's plan. Ji Tianxing naturally did not reject her request. After killing his way into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground, it would be best if he could capture the master of the Blood Blade sect alive and hand her over to be dealt with. Even if he could not do it, he could at least let the master of the Blood Blade sect whip his corpse to vent the hatred that had accumulated for thousands of years. The matter was thus settled. Ji Tianxing followed left emissary Jin and the other two and quietly left the unnamed villa. Under the cover of the night, the four entered Hailin County City and arrived at a certain villa in the west of the city. On the surface, this villa looked like the residence of a wealthy merchant. There were a lot of people in the mansion, and they were rich and overbearing. Everywhere was built in a grand and magnificent manner. Usually, many merchants and caravans would enter and leave this villa. Even at night, there would be an endless stream of visitors. But in reality, this villa was the secret base of the Blood Blade sect and also the branch of the Hailin County. Ji Tianxing, left emissary Jin and the other two quietly entered the underground passage under the lead of the guard commander. Then, they stepped into an underground hall. The hall was heavily guarded and protected by a powerful array to prevent outsiders from spying on them. In the center of the hall was a high platform with a radius of 300 meters. It was made of dozens of precious gems and special spatial god stones. Densely packed array patterns were carved on it. Without a doubt, this was a teleportation array. The guard commander and the deacon of the branch were busy adding spatial god stones to activate the teleportation array. Ji Tianxing and the other three stood in the hall and waited. Taking advantage of this opportunity, left emissary Jin introduced to Ji Tianxing, "This teleportation array is very expensive to build. The cost of maintenance and use is also very high. Although our sect has branches in 18 counties, only 9 of them are equipped with teleportation arrays. The one in Hailin County is the northernmost one. In a while, we will use this teleportation array to enter Shanyang County in the south. It will save us at least 8 days." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "The reason why teleportation arrays are so expensive is because spatial god stones are very rare. In fact, experts who had reached the Divine King realm did not even need a teleportation array to travel. This is because Divine King experts' divine power is strong enough to make use of spatial laws to teleport. Even a first-degree Divine King can teleport up to 100 million miles in one go. Actually, this was only for ordinary Divine Kings. He had already mastered spatial laws and could teleport up to 200,000 miles in one go. When he reached the 9th-level Divine Lord realm, he could teleport up to 1,000,000 miles. If he reached the Divine King realm, he would be able to teleport up to 100 million miles in. After hearing what he said, left emissary Jin, Blood Dragon Right emissary and Sir God Blood Illusion smiled bitterly. Left emissary Jin shook his head. Divine King said Divine King to teleport. But Divine King experts. Not to mention the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom, even in the entire Great Yen Empire, there hadn't been a God King expert for close to 1,000 years. I estimate that only the entire Northern Heaven region will give birth to 2 or 3 Divine Kings. Ji Tianxing listened with a calm expression and didn't say anything. According to the situation 1,000 years ago, this was indeed the case. A region only had 2 or 3 Divine Kings. He didn't know what boundless heaven mainland looked like now. Very soon an hour passed. The teleportation array was fully activated. The high platform lit up with rainbow divine light and gave out a strong fluctuation of divine power. In the middle of the high platform, there was a 30 feet tall door of blazing white light. It was dark inside the door. "Let's go." Divine King of the Divine King Blood Illusion led the way to the door of light. Left emissary Jin, Divine King of the Divine King and Ji Tianxing followed closely behind. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The 4 of them stepped into the door of light one after another and were swallowed by the darkness. After a while, the teleportation door of light dissipated slowly. The divine light on the high platform also disappeared gradually. Ji Tianxing only felt darkness in front of his eyes and then it became bright. When he opened his eyes and could see his surroundings clearly, he was already at another location. Swoosh, swoosh. He looked around and realized he was standing on a stone platform that was 100 feet tall. Divine King of the Divine King Blood Illusion, Divine King of the Divine King Blood Illusion and left emissary Jin were beside him. The high platform with a radius of 100 feet was lit up with divine light. There were dozens of guards around it. At first glance, it was no different from the Lin County branch. The teleportation array and the guard's attire were all the same. But in fact, this was the Xianxia County branch. A guard commander came forward and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Deputy Sect Leader, Left Emissary Jean, and Divine King of the Divine King." Left Emissary Jean pointed at Ji Tianxing and said, "This is young Master Tianxing." The guard commander was stunned. He quickly bowed and said, "Greetings, young Master Tianxing." Ji Tianxing didn't mind. He waved his hand and asked him to leave. Then, the four of them walked out of the underground hall and returned to the manor above ground. The Xianxia County branch was also a manor. But it wasn't in Xianxia County. It was at the peak of a towering mountain tens of thousands of miles away from the city. Half of the mountain was shrouded in clouds and mist. The manor seemed to be in a sea of clouds, and the environment was quiet and elegant. Left Emissary Jean and the others were very familiar with this. After settling Ji Tianxing in a courtyard, they went to carry out their mission. Although Ji Tianxing wanted to launch a surprise attack on the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds and end the battle at lightning speed. However, they couldn't be reckless. Left Emissary Jean and the other two still needed to make some preparations. At the very least, he had to gather a large number of elite experts in advance. The Left Emissary Jean and the Blood Dragon Right Emissary were the best at mobilizing people, so it was fine to leave it to them. Ji Tianxing didn't need to care about anything. He only needed to meditate in the courtyard. 2 whole days passed. Inside the Xianxia County branch, the atmosphere was heavy and solemn. Every once in a while, a group of elite experts would arrive at the branch through the teleportation array. These elite experts were the backbone of the Blood Blade sect. There were elite disciples of the Blood Blade sect as well as experts from their vassal forces. In these 2 days, more than 30 groups of experts had gathered at the Xianxia County branch through the teleportation array. According to Left Emissary Jin's calculations, more than 800 elite experts and 18 godlords had been gathered in the past 2 days. Of course, the elders and guardians of the Bloodblade sect, as well as the 200 or so disciples, did not come. They would follow the sect master of the Bloodblade sect and head to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds. Everyone would only gather when the final battle began. At dawn on the 3rd day, the people of the Bloodblade sect started to gather. More than 800 people lined up neatly on the square in the middle of the manor. These 800 experts were all wearing standard black armor with the symbol of the Blood Blade embroidered on their chests. They were divided into 18 teams led by 18 godlords. They drove the divine ships toward the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds. Shui Huan, Blood Dragon, Left Emissary Jean and Ji Tianxing moved together. They also took a monarch-grade divine ship and left the Xianxia County branch. When the sky just brightened, 19 divine warships of various shapes and sizes flew into the sky one after another, heading toward the southeast. Today was the day to enter the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds and fight to the death. P.S. Readers, I'm He Wuhan. I recommend a free app that supports downloading, listening to books, no ads and many reading modes. Please follow. Book friends, quickly follow. Chapter 2978. The Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground was 800,000 miles away from the Xianxia County branch. With the speed of 19 divine ships, they could arrive in 4 hours. This distance was relatively close. Ji Tianxing could not help but wonder if the Blood Blade sect master had set up the Xianxia County branch nearby because he wanted to reach the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground as quickly as possible. On the way to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. Within the dark red divine ship, Ji Tianxing, Left Emissary Jean, and Blood Illusion God Lord sat in a secret room, meditating. Blood Dragon Right Emissary was focused on steering the divine ship while checking the surroundings. With nothing to do, Ji Tianxing asked Left Emissary Jean, "What is the enmity between your sect master and the Blood Sword sect master? Why does the Blood Blade sect master hate the Blood Sword sect master so much that he wants to vent his anger by whipping his corpse?" Left Emissary Jean had a difficult expression as he stammered, "Young Master Tianxing, this? I'm not too sure. It was not that he did not know, but that he did not dare to speak casually. Blood Illusion Godlord said calmly, now that things have come to this, the final battle is about to be decided. Young Master Tianxing is with us, so what else can't you say? Left Emissary Jin only spoke after getting the Vice Sect Master's approval. Young Master Tianxing, the Sect Master and the Blood Sword Sect Master were actually brother and sister 2,000 years ago. Senior brother and junior sister? Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and was immediately interested. He asked, what's going on? Tell me about it. Left Emissary Jin said calmly, 2,000 years ago in the Southern Celestial Beast Empire, there was a hermit called Lin Wufa, known as Divine Lord Wufa. His life was legendary. He had a like-minded partner and they traveled the world hand in hand, exploring various forbidden grounds and ruins. The couple did not like power, but they were obsessed with studying ancient divine Dao techniques and were determined to travel the entire continent. They were in love for many years, but they did not have a child, so they adopted a celestial beast boy and named him Lin Shan. Lin Shan was extremely talented and had high comprehension, so he learned the true teachings of Divine Lord Wufa. Decades later, his wife gave birth to a girl named Lin Shui. Shui Lin has inherited the wisdom and beauty of the immortal couple. She is naturally lively, kind, enthusiastic, and cheerful. Her cultivation aptitude and talent are even more monstrous than Lin Shan's. At this point, Ji Tianxing vaguely guessed the answer. He nodded and said, in that case, your sect master is Lin Shui, and Lin Shan is the master of the Bloodsword sect? Left Emissary Jin nodded and continued, originally, the Divine Emperor and his wife loved each other very much. Their disciple and daughter were both very intelligent and talented. Their family of 4 traveled the world, and it could be said that their happiness was complete. However, during one of their adventures, they fell into a desperate situation, and there was no chance of survival. In order to save Lin Shan and Lin Shui, the wife of the immortal monarch sacrificed herself and finally died. Since then, the powerless divine monarch had suffered a heavy blow and was disheartened. Therefore, he ended his adventuring career and brought Lin Shan and Lin Shui to live in seclusion at the border of the Celestial Beast Empire. During those hundreds of years, the grief of not being able to become a divine monarch could not be erased. Thus, he wholeheartedly taught his disciples and daughter. He had a blood sword and the wife of the immortal monarch had a demon knife. They were both top-grade divine weapons passed down from ancient times. The powerless divine monarch gave the blood sword to Lin Shan and imparted him all kinds of secret arts and sword arts. He then passed the demon knife to Lin Shui and taught her all kinds of divine arts. When he heard this, Ji Tianxing tried to ask, so this is the origin of the Blood Sword sect and the Blood Blade sect? But what happened after that? Was the powerless divine monarch killed? Left Emissary Jin took a deep look at him and nodded solemnly, that's right. 1,000 years ago, during the War of the Gods, the entire boundless heaven continent fell into chaos. At that time, the powerless divine monarch had already reached the 8th stage realm. Lin Shan had also reached the 7th stage realm, becoming an upper divine monarch. Even the youngest Lin Shui had also reached the 6th stage realm. When the war struck, the Sky Demon Empire was embroiled in endless chaos. The powerless divine monarch was also implicated. He was severely injured and could only escape with Lin Shan and Lin Shui. However, Lin Shan had wild ambitions and secretly colluded with a strong enemy. Not only did he kill the powerless divine monarch and snatch his life's ultimate arts and divine arts, he even pushed the blame onto the strong enemy and pretended to take revenge for his master. He even wanted to marry Lin Shui as his wife, rather than cultivating the Dragon Sword Phoenix Blade technique. After all, the powerless divine monarch and his wife both wielded the blood sword and demon knife. The two of them were in perfect harmony and had great chemistry. If the powerless divine monarch's wife did not fall, they would have great hopes of breaking through to the divine king realm. Lin Shan did this because he wanted the demon knife and the Dragon Sword Phoenix Blade technique. However, the heavens were clear. Lin Shui was deceived for a while, but she still discovered Lin Shan's evil deeds. The two of them broke off and had a great battle. In that battle, Lin Shui was no match for the blood sword Lin Shan. Not only was her godhead damaged, her heart was also pierced. Lin Shui used a secret art, and after luckily escaping, she concealed her identity for hundreds of years. 100 years later, she finally recovered from her injuries and broke through to the 7th stage realm. When she went to find Lin Shan to take revenge, she discovered that Lin Shan had already left the Sky Demon Empire and disappeared without a trace. After many inquiries and searches, Lin Shui finally found out that Lin Shan had escaped to the Great Yan Empire and established his own sect in the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom, establishing the Blood Sword sect. Hence, she chased him to the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom to seek revenge on Lin Shan. But unfortunately, she was alone and weak. She failed several times to assassinate Lin Shan and even fell into a dangerous situation herself. Later on, she made 2 good friends, and under the persuasion of her good friends, she established the Blood Blade sect. Speaking to this point, Left Emissary Jin's tone turned gloomy and was filled with indignation. Ji Tianxing felt the same way as he nodded. That Blood Sword sect's master Lin Shan is indeed sinister and despicable, unscrupulous. No wonder your sect master has such a deep blood feud with him and even whipped his corpse to vent his anger. The enmity of killing one's father is absolutely irreconcilable. That's right, your sect master's 2 best friends should be the both of you, right? Left Emissary Jin nodded and explained, the reason why Shui Huan does not have a physical body and has always appeared as an illusion is not only because his cultivation technique is special. Most importantly, Shui Huan helped the sect master block Lin Shan's blood sword secret technique back then, and his divine body was destroyed by the blood sword. Ji Tianxing finally understood and could not help but feel deep veneration. The friendship between the 3 of you is not easy to come by. Fortunately, the 2 of you helped and supported him. Otherwise, your sect master would not have been able to last until today. Shui Huan said in a gloomy voice, our original intention in establishing the Blood Blade sect was to kill the Blood Sword sect's master and avenge him. As long as we can kill the Blood Sword sect's master Lin Shan, we will not hesitate even if we have to bury the entire Blood Blade sect. However, I have to remind you, young Master Tianxing, that blood sword is a remnant of the old Divine Lord. It is a supreme divine weapon at the monarch level and has unbelievable effects. After 1,000 years of nurturing, Lin Shan has already raised the power of the blood sword to another level. I reckon that apart from the sect master's demon blade, no other divine weapon can resist it. Young Master Tianxing, you have to be wary of that blood sword. Mobile version update website. Chapter 2979. Ji Tianxing finally understood after hearing the story of the Blood Blade sect master and the Blood Sword sect master. It was no wonder that the Blood Blade sect master agreed after careful consideration when his suggestion was so radical. This was because the Blood Blade sect master wanted revenge too much. It was no wonder that the other 5 sects would form cliques and rely on the royal family. Only the Blood Blade sect remained unrecruited, ranking last among the 5. This was because the other sects were ambitious. They wanted to fight for power and status and pass down their legacies. The Blood Blade sect was founded for revenge. Everything made sense now. The Blood Blade sect master is actually a woman, and a woman with a hard life. Ji Tianxing sighed silently. But on second thought, wasn't it because the other sects were ambitious while the Blood Blade sect only wanted revenge? Was that why he had formed an alliance with the Blood Blade sect and became their ally? In that case, it could be said that it was the will of the heavens. His unintentional action had actually helped the Blood Blade sect greatly. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed. The 19 divine warships crossed mountains and rivers and were about to reach the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land when they slowed down. Young Master Tianxing, the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land is up ahead. We've arrived, Left Envoy Jin reminded. Ji Tianxing finished his meditation and released his divine sense to explore the outside. He saw a region shrouded in dark red mist in the mountains and rivers 5,000 kilometers away. The surrounding area was filled with green mountains and clear waters. Only the area within a radius of 5,000 kilometers was dyed a dark red color by blood. Ji Tianxing could sense a special aura permeating that region. There was an invisible force field. Left Envoy Jin took the initiative to introduce. The dragon blood forbidden land originated several thousand years ago. Legend has it that a divine dragon fell here, slain by a god king. After the divine dragon died, its flesh and blood returned to the world, dyeing that region red with blood. After several thousand years, the ground is still dark red and filled with a powerful dragon's aura. This place once attracted countless powerful monsters and divine beasts, who stayed here all year round to absorb the dragon's aura. The Blood Sword sect master chose to establish his sect here because he wanted to absorb the dragon's aura to nurture his blood sword and increase his strength. Ji Tianxing nodded and asked, "What's the situation in the dragon blood forbidden land now? Do you have a plan of attack?" The blood illusion god monarch took the initiative to answer. Our sect has placed a few spies in the dragon blood forbidden ground. Not long ago, the spies reported that the defenses in the forbidden area were empty. Most of the elites and main forces of the Blood Sword sect were concentrated in the vast mountain range. Currently, there were only 500 guards, over 3,000 odd job workers, and over 100 elite disciples in the forbidden area. Other than that, the Blood Sword sect's sect master has been guarding the sacred ground and hasn't shown himself. After introducing the situation of the dragon blood forbidden land, he sneered coldly and said, "Young Master Tianxing's prediction is very accurate. The dragon blood forbidden land is empty of power, and it is the best time for us to take revenge." The sect master, several elders, and consecrators were rushing over with the elite disciples of the sect. Based on their speed, we should be able to meet up in 4 hours at most. The sect master's intention is to wait for our army to gather before we charge into the dragon blood forbidden land together. They had to flatten the dragon blood forbidden land with the momentum of a thunderbolt. We must not give the Blood Sword sect a chance to catch their breaths and prevent any unexpected changes from happening. Ji Tianxing thought for a while and shook his head. The sect master's thoughts coincide with mine. But since we have already arrived, it is not good to wait any longer. Otherwise, the Blood Sword sect will quickly notice and defend with all their strength. I have decided to charge into the dragon blood forbidden land before the Blood Sword sect can react. By the time the sect master arrives, we will have already cut off the wings of the Blood Sword sect and should be attacking the sacred mountain. The blood illusion god monarch hesitated and couldn't make up his mind. Left emissary Jin frowned and thought for a while before saying, "Young Master Tianxing, please be patient. I will first send a message to the sect master to ask for instructions." Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement. Left emissary Jin hurriedly took out a jade slip to ask for the Blood Blade sect master's opinion. In less than 100 breaths, he received a reply from the Blood Blade sect master. There was only one sentence in the jade slip, but it was extremely heavy. "Before this seed arrives, we will follow young Master Tianxing's orders." Left emissary Jin was rather shocked and handed the jade slip to the Blood Illusion God Monarch and the Blood Dragon Sect Master. After reading it, the two of them revealed looks of disbelief. They simply couldn't believe that the Sect Master had never seen Ji Tianxing before, but trusted him so much. Could it be that the Sect Master and young Master Tianxing were of the same mind, and their thoughts and personalities were very similar? Left emissary Jin and the other two immediately cupped their hands and bowed to Ji Tianxing, saying, "As per the sect master's orders, before she arrives, we will follow young master's orders." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said in a solemn tone, "Very good." The blood illusion god monarch and the right emissary will follow me into the dragon blood forbidden land and try to destroy the defensive formation. Left emissary Jin will stay here and command the 18 divine ships to wait for our signal. After we break through the dragon blood forbidden land's defenses and send you a signal, we will launch a large-scale attack. Left emissary Jin felt slightly comforted and hurriedly nodded, saying, "As per the young master's orders. This method is more reliable. I was worried that you would lead everyone to attack directly." Ji Tianxing couldn't be bothered with him, but the blood illusion god monarch coughed and reminded him, "Young master's strategy and wisdom are at the same level as the sect master's. It's not something you can understand or guess." Left emissary Jin smiled embarrassedly, saying, "Young master, please don't blame me. Let's not waste time. It's time to move." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and flew out of the divine ship first. The two divine monarchs, Blood Illusion and Blood Dragon, hurriedly followed him out of the divine ship. Ji Tianxing used the Armillary Heaven secret technique and merged with the world, hiding his tracks and aura. Blood Illusion and Blood Dragon also used their concealment techniques and followed him silently, heading straight for the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. The reason why Ji Tianxing chose them to follow him was because they were better at concealment and wouldn't be discovered by the people of the Blood Sword sect. Soon, the three of them crossed thousands of miles and stepped into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. As soon as they entered the dark red blood ground, an invisible dragon aura force field enveloped the three of them like a formation. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, was completely unaffected. Blood Illusion and Blood Dragon's divine power circulation slowed down slightly, and their auras weakened by 30%. This was the suppression of the divine dragon's might, and no one could avoid it. After all, the divine dragon bloodline was naturally noble. Unless one was like Ji Tianxing, who possessed the bloodline of a peak god king, only then would one be able to ignore the might of a divine dragon. After walking 1,000 feet into the Forbidden Land, Ji Tianxing stopped flying. He used his God's Eye mystic technique and immediately saw that there was an invisible defensive formation in front of him. This was the outermost layer of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds, the first layer of the Great Sect Protection Formation. The dark red light shield with a radius of 10,000 miles was a monarch-grade high-grade divine formation. Its defensive power was extremely strong. Ji Tianxing's eyes turned golden as he stared at the light barrier without blinking. He carefully observed it for a quarter of an hour. Finally, he was able to see through the structure of the formation, as well as the method of setting it up. He also found the point of breaking it. Without any hesitation, he used his divine ability to break the formation. End of chapter. Update soonest. The new 81st Chinese network. IM. Chapter 2980. Ji Tianxing stood invisible in the sky, concentrating on casting a spell to break the formation. Sir God Shui Huan and Sir God Shui Long were guarding him on both sides. Luckily, this was the outermost circle of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground and there weren't many patrolling guards. Plus, no one had directly attacked the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground since the Blood Sword sect was founded 1,000 years ago. Those guards were already careless and wouldn't be too vigilant when patrolling. In just an hour, Ji Tianxing had cracked the Grand Protective Formation. Swish! A giant crack appeared on the invisible dark red light shield and quickly spread in all directions. After a while, the crack expanded to 10 miles. Besides, the array also stopped working and wouldn't automatically repair the crack. Ji Tianxing took Shui Huan and Divine Lord Blood Dragon through the crack and continued to fly into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. After flying another 3,000 miles, they were blocked by the second invisible array. This was a rainbow-colored light barrier that blotted out the sky. It maintained an invisible state, and its defensive power was even stronger. Not only was this array strong, but it could also detect divine power waves and attack invaders. Ji Tianxing observed the formation even more cautiously, and only after a full 15 minutes did he begin to crack it. This time, it took more time to break it. It took almost 2 hours. The array stopped working and a giant crack appeared and spread in all directions. It only calmed down after the crack expanded to 20 miles. Ji Tianxing and the other two continued to go deeper. When they arrived at the heart of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Grounds and saw the dark red lone peak, they were blocked by the third sect protecting Grand Formation. This great crimson blood formation with a radius of 1,000 miles was the last great protective formation. It wasn't invisible, it had always been there, flashing dark red light and surrounded by red flames. After all, this was the core area of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground and most of the guards were gathered here. At least 200 guards in blood-red armor were patrolling the ground and the sky with sabers, swords, and bows in their hands. The atmosphere became very tense. The two divine lords, Shui Huan and Shui Long, were sweating. Ji Tianxing wasn't worried. He said, "What are you worried about?" In any case, it was the last protective formation. As long as it could be broken, it didn't matter even if it was discovered. Once this monarch breaks this formation, send out the signal to attack. Shui Huan and Sir God Blood Dragon were relieved. They replied with a voice transmission. This time, Ji Tianxing was even more careful when cracking the formation. He racked his brains and used his Deity King level experience in array formations. After 3 attempts, he finally succeeded. Even so, he still spent an entire hour. When the formation was broken, the crimson light shield within a radius of 1,000 miles burst into cracking noises and burst into a blood-red light that soared into the sky. Dozens of huge cracks quickly spread across the light barrier. A large cluster of bloody light and flames quickly collapsed and dissipated. Such a huge commotion immediately alerted the surrounding guards. Many of the guards were horrified and sent out alarms, asking for help from the disciples on the holy mountain. More than 100 guards rushed over from all directions to the place where the gap had appeared. This area was where Ji Tianxing and the other 2 were hiding. Shui Huan and Sir God Blood Dragon remembered his instructions and sent out the signal to attack without hesitation. Boom! Crack! 2 dazzling beams of blood-red light soared into the sky like divine dragons and exploded with a loud bang. At the same time, Ji Tianxing flew out as fast as lightning and pounced on the nearest group of guards. There were a total of 36 crimson armor guards. They all held swords, spears, swords, and halberds. They rushed over with murderous intent and roared. Ji Tianxing raised his right palm expressionlessly and slapped out a mountain-sized golden dragon claw. Boom! The next moment, there was a deafening sound. The 36 crimson armor guards were smashed into pieces by the golden dragon claw. Their flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Instant kill. They were only LV4 or LV5 Heavenly God Realm guards. Even if there were 36 of them, they could only be killed by Ji Tianxing with 1 slap. Then Ji Tianxing turned around and flew to the other side. He crossed 100 miles in 1 step and punched another group of crimson armor guards. Boom! Crack! More than 20 crimson armor guards were smashed into meat paste by the draconic elephant divine fist. Blood splattered everywhere. Sir God Blood Dragon and Sir God Blood Huan witnessed this scene with their own eyes. Seeing Ji Tianxing's prowess, the 2 of them were excited and surprised. Young Master Tianxing is indeed our sect's lucky star. The 3 layers of the sect protection array of the Blood Sword sect are impregnable. No one can break through them. Today, he managed to break through all of them in 4 hours. This is a miracle. His strength is unfathomable. His methods are ruthless and decisive. Even his attainments in the array Dao are so high. Who is young Master Tianxing? While they were shocked, Sir God Blood Dragon and Sir God Blood Huan drew their swords and charged at the nearby guards. Kill all the bastards of the Blood Sword sect. The 2 Sir God Blood Dragon roared as they used their divine skills and massacred group after group of guards. In a short while, the 200 or so crimson armor guards were slaughtered by the 3 of them. Not a single corpse was left intact. However, there were still more than 100 guards who rushed over fearlessly. They no longer fought individually. Instead, they gathered together and formed the Crimson Sword 8 Gates battle formation. This battle formation contained the true intent of the 8 Gates extreme weapons. It could gather the power of 160 guards and use divine skills that were comparable to a Sir God's. After the battle formation was activated, the 100 or so guards moved in unison. They seemed to have a tacit understanding. Dazzling crimson sword lights that were more than 100 feet long slashed over one after another. Sir God Blood Dragon and Sir God Blood Dragon had solemn expressions as they blocked and dealt with the attacks seriously. However, Ji Tianxing turned a blind eye to it. He didn't put this battle formation in his eyes at all. He roared in a domineering manner and charged towards the battle formation with an indomitable will. He clenched his hands in the air and formed 2 golden dragon claws that were as big as mountains. He then smashed down with an unstoppable force. Boom! A loud sound, as if stars had collided, exploded in the sky. The two golden dragon claws fell like meteors and hit the battle formation. Immediately, the Crimson Sword 8 Gates battle formation was smashed into pieces. The crimson swords in the sky were smashed into pieces, and the 100 or so guards were also smashed into meat paste. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. 100-mile deep pit was formed on the ground, and spiderweb-like cracks appeared around it. Sir God Blood Dragon and Sir God Blood Dragon could also do such a powerful destructive force. However, the two of them didn't have Ji Tianxing's ability to see through the flaws of the Crimson Sword 8 Gates battle formation and destroy its vital points in an overbearing manner. To a Sir God, strength and cultivation were important. However, battle experience, insight and knowledge were more important. In the blink of an eye, the 100 or so Crimson Armor Guards were all killed by Ji Tianxing. There were no more obstacles in front of him. Ji Tianxing charged towards the sacred mountain with murderous intent. At the same time, 10,000 miles away, Left Emissary Jean received the signal and led 18 battleships to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. Translator, Timothy_editor, Globeglotter. Chapter 2981. The 18 divine ships formed a formation and charged into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground. Every divine ship opened their divine cannons, the muzzles glowing with divine light. The moment they discovered the guards and disciples of the Bloodsword sect, the 18 divine ships would unleash a barrage of attacks and wash the land with blood. Under such circumstances, only divine lord experts would be spared. No matter how many celestial god guards and experts there were, they would all be turned to dust. However, the 18 divine ships did not encounter any resistance from the Bloodsword sect. Everyone could only see the devastated land, which was filled with ravines and cracks. What was even more surprising was that the Bloodsword sect originally had 3 protective arrays. Each one was more sophisticated than the last and had a powerful defense. However, the divine ships did not encounter any resistance as they advanced. The 3 sect protecting great formations were all broken. They all stopped operating, and a huge gap appeared. Left Emissary Jean, the 18 divine lords, and the other experts were all shocked. Everyone found it hard to believe that Ji Tianxing had actually broken through 3 sect protecting grand arrays in a short span of 4 hours. This was an unbelievable miracle. Soon, the 18 divine ships reached the core region of the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground and arrived near the sacred mountain. The divine ships spread out and stopped in the sky, surrounding the lone sacred mountain. Left Emissary Jean and the 18 divine lords left the divine ships and stood in the sky. They all took out their weapons and glared at the sacred mountain. More than 800 elite experts remained in the divine ships and waited for orders. Everyone saw Ji Tianxing, Xue Huan, and Xue Long looking down at the peak of the sacred mountain with murderous intent. Ji Tianxing stood at the front, closest to the sacred mountain. With a voice as loud as a bell, he shouted, "Lin Shan, come out and die." His thunderous voice reverberated through the sacred mountain, causing everyone's eardrums to hurt. On the wide and flat peak of the sacred mountain, there were only 100 guards in blood-red armor gathered in the plaza. They all gripped their weapons and stood in a defensive formation, warily glaring at Ji Tianxing's group. Hearing Ji Tianxing's shouts and provocations, many of the guards showed indignation, but no one dared to come out and fight. Just a moment ago, they had witnessed Ji Tianxing display his invincible might and easily kill over 100 guards. They had all been scared out of their wits and fled back to the peak of the holy mountain. How could they still have the slightest bit of fighting spirit? Now, they could only hope that the sect master of the Bloodsword sect would show himself and kill the intruders. Unfortunately, it had already happened for a quarter of an hour. 80% of the 500 guards were killed, leaving only 100 or so. The enemy fleet was also closing in on the sacred mountain and was about to reach the peak. Even now, the sect master of the Bloodsword sect still hadn't appeared. Even the elders and consecrators of the sect did not show up. This caused the surviving guards to feel extremely dejected and hopeless. Right at this moment, angry shouts suddenly came from the 2 great halls on the mountain peak. The guards turned their heads to look and saw two groups of disciples wearing red robes and holding swords rushing to the square as fast as lightning. There were nearly 100 people in the two groups, all of them elite disciples of the Blood Sword sect. Their strength had all reached the 6th level of the Celestial God realm or above. The quite a few disciples leading the group were all half-step Divine Lord realms. Bastards of the Blood Blade sect, you dare barge into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and offend the might of our sect? You're seeking your own deaths. Bastards of the Blood Blade sect, I'll make sure you die without a grave today. The half-step Divine Lord disciples stood at the front of the group, facing off against the people of the Blood Blade sect. They roared with surging killing intent, their faces filled with fighting spirit. There was not the slightest bit of fear. Left Emissary Jean coldly looked at them and barked, "Where's Lin Shan? Tell him to come out and die." Among the strongest disciples, the leader was a tall and sturdy man with a square face and a full beard on his chin. He held a heavy black iron sword with both hands and looked at Left Emissary Jean arrogantly. He replied, "You despicable bastards don't have the right to see our sect master." Left Emissary Jean frowned and sneered, "Your sect master is probably not in the sect right now. He's still in the distant mountains, right?" The moment he said that, the people of the Blood Blade sect all sneered and mocked him. The chief disciple's expression immediately changed. The elite disciples also had ugly expressions and retorted. However, their retorts were rather weak. They clearly lacked confidence. This made the people of the Blood Blade sect even more certain that the sect master of the Blood Sword sect was not in the sect, but in the mountains. In terms of scheming, the Blood Blade sect was better. The Blood Sword sect was already in an extremely passive position. However, the chief disciple was unwilling to yield. He roared, "You're the left emissary of the Blood Blade sect and a Divine Lord expert who has been famous for many years. Don't you feel ashamed bullying us juniors? If the Blood Blade sect has any backbone, send your disciples to fight. If I don't beat your young disciples to the ground, I'll wring my own head off." This chief disciple was extremely confident and his tone was extremely domineering. The nearly 100 disciples of the Blood Sword sect all felt elated. They looked at the people of the Blood Blade sect with provocative expressions. As for the young disciples of the Blood Blade sect, they were all enraged. All of them rubbed their fists, wanting nothing more than to draw their blades and fight. Even Shui Huan, Shui Long, and Left Emissary Jean were hesitant. It was true that they were all veteran Divine Lords who had been famous for many years. If they personally fought against the disciples of the Blood Sword sect, it would be beneath their dignity. It would also be tantamount to admitting that the disciples of the Blood Blade sect were inferior to the disciples of the Blood Sword sect. However, if they really sent their disciples to fight against the disciples of the Blood Sword sect, it would take a lot of time. Just as the three of them were hesitating, Ji Tianxing suddenly sneered disdainfully. "Little brat, do you think we're here to visit the Blood Sword sect and exchange pointers with you? This lord has come to exterminate the Blood Sword sect." As he sneered, he formed a hand seal with his right hand and sent out a dazzling golden sword light at the chief disciple. The sword light shot out like lightning. The chief disciple was enveloped by the sword intent, and his body stiffened in place. He was unable to dodge or run. Boom! With a muffled explosion, the half-step Divine Lord chief disciple was struck by the dazzling golden sword light and exploded into a rain of blood. He had been instantly killed. Not only had his body been reduced to a rain of blood, but his godhead had also been reduced to dust. A few disciples who were close to him had their heads and faces splashed with blood. They were so stunned that they forgot to wipe the blood off their faces. Their eyes were red with grief and indignation as they glared at Ji Tianxing. "You vicious bastard! As a Divine Lord, you actually dared to attack a junior disciple. You have no shame. You executioner! Our sect will not live under the same sky as you." The disciples of the Blood Sword sect were enraged. They glared at Ji Tianxing with murderous intent as they roared and cursed. Ji Tianxing expressionlessly said, "Childish." He once more waved his palms, sending out sword light that blotted out the sky. End of this chapter. Chapter 2982. Bush, bush, bush. The dazzling golden sword light that covered the sky fell from the sky like a rain of arrows. At least 50 Blood Sword sect disciples were enveloped by the dazzling golden sword lights. These people were immediately filled with horror. Their faces turned pale as they scattered in all directions in fear. Even the 40 or so nearby disciples that weren't enveloped by the sword lights subconsciously retreated. Bam, bam, bam. Of the 50 or so Blood Sword sect disciples, there were a few lucky ones who managed to escape the range of the sword light and keep their lives. However, the remaining 50 disciples were all killed by the sword lights. Blood and flesh splattered as sword lights flashed. After the dust and the rain of blood dispersed, a deep pit could be seen on the ground. Many bones, weapons, and armor fragments were scattered in the pit. There were also some fragments of godheads. The 50 disciples that were lucky enough to survive were all intimidated by Ji Tianxing's might and were both furious and terrified. They didn't dare to gather together, so they scattered and pointed at Ji Tianxing, left emissary Jin, and the others as they cursed. You bastards who deserve to die by 1,000 cuts, you will all die a horrible death. Even if we are killed today, we will never submit. We were born as members of the Blood Sword sect, and we will die as ghosts of the Blood Sword sect. We will never be defeated. Bastards of the Blood Blade sect, the sect master will definitely avenge us. It won't be long before the sect master cuts you to pieces and returns today's hatred tenfold. These disciples knew that they would definitely die today. Not to mention the many divine lords and disciples of the Blood Blade sect, just Ji Tianxing alone could easily kill them all. All they could do was straighten their backs and straighten their chests. Even if they were killed on the spot, they would die with dignity and not tarnish the reputation of the Blood Sword sect. Of course, if possible, they would also like to stall for time. At the same time, Shui Huan, Shui Long, and left emissary Jin waved their hands and gave the order to attack. What are you waiting for? Open fire. The sect master of the Blood Sword sect isn't here. Let's use this opportunity to destroy the Blood Sword sect. Destroy their sacred mountain and the dragon blood forbidden land. The three of them roared furiously. The 18 divine warships obeyed the order and blasted out divine cannons and fiery light pillars that blotted out the sky. Boom boom boom. At least 500 beams of dazzling multicolored divine light and dark red flames streaked across the sky and blasted towards the mountain peak. The mountain peaks within a radius of dozens of miles were covered by the divine cannons. If this batch of divine cannons were to land, the mountain peak would be torn apart. Many palaces and buildings would also be razed to the ground. As for the 50 disciples and 100 blood-armored guards, there was no way they would be spared either. He would definitely be crushed to pieces and turned into ashes. The cannons and divine light that blotted out the sky had already enveloped the peak of the mountain. In the next moment, the mountain peak would be razed to the ground. At this critical moment, the sound of a sword piercing through gold and splitting stones suddenly erupted from the Blood Kenshin Hall in the middle of the mountain peak. Clang! The crisp but unpleasant sword chimes seemed to tear the sky and space apart. In the blink of an eye, a huge blood-red sword that was thousands of feet tall flew out of the temple and into the sky. The blood-red sword radiated a boundless bloody light that instantly enveloped the entire mountain. The dozens of palaces and buildings on the mountain peak, the 50 disciples, and the 100 guards were all enveloped by the bloody light. The bloody light was like a canopy or an inverted bowl that protected the mountain peak. Boom 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 boom. More than 500 cannons and light pillars viciously blasted the bloody canopy, creating thunderous booms that shook the heavens. Countless people were dizzy from the loud booms. The weaker disciples were even shaken to the point of bleeding from their ears. The entire mountain shook violently, and countless rocks and stones collapsed halfway up the mountain. The light pillars and cannons that filled the sky all collapsed, splashing out fragments of divine light that blotted out the sky. The bloody canopy, however, was undamaged. It only trembled a few dozen times before calming down. On the mountain peak plaza, many guards and disciples looked up at the bloody canopy with incredulous expressions. After a moment of daze, They came back to their senses and cheered excitedly. "We're not dead. We're saved. Ha! The sacred sword saved us. It must be the sect master. The sect master is back." After 1,000 years, the sacred sword has finally appeared. The mighty sect master. The disciples and guards of the blood sword sect all knew that the sacred mountain contained a bloody sacred sword, the #1 divine artifact of the sect. Ever since the blood sword sect had been established, it had never encountered a calamity or great calamity. Thus, the mysterious bloody sword had never appeared before. In their words, the blood sword sect had yet to encounter a powerful enemy worthy of using the sacred sword. But today, at the moment of life and death for the blood sword sect, the mysterious bloody sword had finally appeared. How could the disciples and guards of the blood sword sect not be wild with joy? The bloody canopy was still there, and the 1,000-zhang tall blood-red sword floated at the top of the canopy, flickering with a blazing bloody light. Ji Tianxing, left emissary Jin, and all the members of the Blood Blade sect looked up at the bloody sword with complicated expressions. Ji Tianxing's eyes were sharp as he carefully observed the sword. He really wanted to know what was so special about the bloody sword that God Monarch Blood Illusion was so afraid of. On the other hand, God Monarch Blood Illusion, left emissary Jin, and the others revealed deep fear and anxiety. After all, it was a supreme monarch-level divine artifact. If the bloody sword continued to protect the sacred mountain, even if the 18 divine ships used all their strength, they might not be able to break through the defense of the bloody sword. The battlefield suddenly calmed down. The members of the blood sword sect rejoiced, but the atmosphere of the blood blade sect was very solemn. At this moment, the 1,000-zhang tall blood-red sword suddenly flashed with a purple light. Whoosh! A black-robed figure more than 3 zhang tall stepped out of the bloody sword. He stood in the sky, exuding a powerful divine might and domineering aura. He stood in the sky and appeared before everyone. The gazes of countless people fell on him in unison. It was a handsome God clan member dressed in black robes. His face was handsome and demonic, and his skin was as white as jade, devoid of blood. He had a pair of elf-like pointy ears and a dark red mark of a bloody sword on his forehead. His purple eyes were emotionless as he indifferently scanned the crowd. In the end, his gaze fell on Ji Tianxing, Shui Huan, Blood Dragon, and left emissary Jin. Bastards of the Blood Blade sect, you really came. However, that demoness Lin Shui didn't come. How dare trash like you charge into the dragon blood forbidden ground? The black-robed god race member said indifferently. His voice wasn't loud, but it clearly spread throughout the area and entered everyone's mind. There was no anger in his tone, but it contained frightening confidence and domineering power. Shui Huan, Blood Dragon, and left emissary Jin all had solemn expressions as they hurriedly sent messages to Ji Tianxing. It's the sect master of the Blood Sword sect. He's Lin Shan. It looks like his strength has improved again. He's not far from the 8th level of the Divine Lord realm. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2983. Actually, there was no need for left emissary Jin and the other two to remind him. Ji Tianxing could also guess that the black-robed Divine Lord was the master of the Blood Sword sect, Lin Shan. After all, this person had walked out of the Blood Sword and had the powerful aura of a high Divine Lord. The disciples and guards of the Blood Sword sect all knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the master of the Blood Sword sect. As for the 10-odd Divine Lords and hundreds of experts of the Blood Blade sect, they all felt a great pressure. Everyone gripped their weapons tightly as they stared at the master of the Blood Sword sect solemnly. Divine Lord Blood Illusion stepped forward and said in a deep voice, Lin Shan, after 300 years, we meet again. Even though your strength has improved, it's useless. You're the only one left in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. No matter how strong you are, you can't defeat so many Divine Lords and experts. Even if the Master doesn't come, we can easily kill you. Stop resisting stubbornly, just admit defeat and surrender. With Divine Lord Blood Illusion's reminder, The people of the Blood Blade sect felt much more at ease and regained their confidence. They were just intimidated by the name of the master of the Blood Sword sect and instinctively felt uneasy and fearful. But it was different now. The Blood Blade sect had the advantage in numbers while the master of the Blood Sword sect was alone. No matter how strong he was, he could not withstand the attacks of so many experts. He would definitely die, so what was there to be afraid of? The master of the Blood Sword sect stared at Divine Lord Blood Illusion as a disdainful sneer appeared on his lips. Blood Illusion, have you forgotten the pain of that sword strike 1,000 years ago? Every time we meet, I have to remind you that it was that sword strike that caused you to lose your divine body forever. You will never be able to recover. Divine Lord Blood Illusion's most painful and infuriating memories were evoked. He roared in a deep voice, Lin Shan, you despicable and shameless bastard. You won't be happy for long. Soon, you will die under my sword. At that time, I'll definitely burn your bones and scatter your ashes, and make you suffer all kinds of pain and torment. Haha. The master of the Blood Sword sect raised his head and laughed. He said in a disdainful tone, I said that only that which Lin Shui is qualified to fight with me. No matter how many of you there are, you're still a bunch of trash. You're only fit to be nourishment for my sword. As he spoke, he manipulated the blood-red greatsword and released an overwhelming slaughter sword intent. Buzz. A layer of blood-red killing intent visible to the naked eye spread out like ripples, covering a radius of several hundred miles. Many of the surgods and experts of the Blood Blade sect were swept by the blood-red killing intent. Immediately, their bodies shook violently as they revealed intense fear. That terrifying killing intent caused the illusion of hell to appear in everyone's minds. It was as if they had fallen into an ice cellar and their bodies were cold. For a moment, the fighting spirit of the Blood Blade sect's members was extinguished, and their fear of the sect master of the Blood Sword sect grew. The Blood Sword sect master became even more pleased with himself when he saw this. He sneered in disdain, Ha! An ant will always be an ant. Everyone was speechless. Only Ji Tianxing remained calm and indifferent from the beginning to the end. Even the terrifying killing intent released by the Blood Sword did not affect him at all. Seeing that the Blood Sword sect master's aura had suppressed everyone else, he took a step forward and said with an indifferent expression, Lin Shan, your performance ends here. The more you bluff, the more it proves that you have a guilty conscience. The moment he said this, countless gazes gathered on him. The Blood Sword sect master also frowned as he stared coldly at Ji Tianxing. Brat, you are Tianxing? Although he had never seen Ji Tianxing before, he was Ji Tianxing's archenemy. However, Ji Tianxing was a mortal enemy of the Blood Sword sect. He had seen Ji Tianxing's portrait long ago, so he could recognize him. You're just a coward who doesn't even dare to go to the desolate mountain range. What right do you have to slander me? The Blood Sword sect master sneered, his face filled with disdain. Ji Tianxing said expressionlessly, I didn't go to the desolate mountain range because I already knew everything and predicted that you would stay behind in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. Thus, I directly charged into the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land and took your head. As for those small fries in the desolate mountain range, I'll catch them all in one fell swoop after killing you. The Blood Sword sect master was stunned for a moment before he burst into wild laughter. No matter how you quibble, you can't hide the fact that you're a coward. Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with pity, Lin Shan, you're the Blood Sword sect master. How could you fall to the point of pretending to be crazy? I saw through your tricks and am already in front of you, about to take your dog life. Yet you're still stubborn and say that I'm a coward. What kind of logic is that? The Blood Sword sect master was speechless and could only frown and stare at him with a malicious gaze. Ji Tianxing continued, in front of me, don't use your little tricks to embarrass yourself. In fact, you don't have any confidence at all. The only reason you're spouting nonsense is to stall for time. You're waiting for your subordinates to return to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land to help you. However, they're all blocking me in the desolate mountain range and won't be able to return in a few days. Moreover, they can't build a teleportation array in the desolate mountain range. Firstly, the price is too great. Secondly, it would take too much time. If I'm not wrong, they must have a divine artifact. A divine artifact that contains the laws of space and can travel through space. The people from the Blood Blade sect nodded when they heard Ji Tianxing's words. They felt like they had come to a sudden realization. However, the Blood Sword sect master's expression changed subtly. A hint of shock flashed through his eyes, and he found it hard to believe. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment, then continued, "The spatial divine artifact that your subordinates can control is at most high monarch grade. If you can fit all the divine lords and experts and bring more than 4,000 people through space, you'll need to spend a lot of resources and time. Let me guess, the distance between the desolate mountain range and the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land is more than 10 million kilometers. That divine artifact might need to travel 3 times and spend several billion divine stones to return to the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. Even if they receive your orders and rush back as quickly as possible, they'll still need 2 hours. What you need to do is to put on a show and stall for 2 hours. Once all your lackeys return, you'll have a chance to turn the tables. This monarch guessed correctly, right?" After saying this, Ji Tianxing smirked at the Blood Sword sect master and said, "Unfortunately, you won't be able to wait for them to come back. In 2 hours, you'll be dead, and the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land will be reduced to ruins." The disciples and guards of the Blood Sword sect were all dumbfounded and looked at each other. As for the divine lords and disciples of the Blood Sword sect, they all breathed a sigh of relief as if a great burden had been lifted from their shoulders. There was a burst of discussion in the crowd. No wonder the people of the Blood Sword sect all ran to the desolate mountain range, leaving only the Blood Sword sect master to guard the sect. No wonder the Blood Sword sect dared to do this. They have a spatial divine artifact that allows them to quickly come back. How did young Master Tianxing know a secret that even our sect doesn't know? If this is all young Master Tianxing's speculation, doesn't that mean he can predict the future? Just how terrifying is his intelligence and strategy? No wonder young Master Tianxing insisted on attacking the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land. He saw through everything long ago. The divine lords and disciples of the Blood Sword sect felt even more reverence and admiration for Ji Tianxing. They suddenly felt that with young Master Tianxing's help, the Blood Sword sect was nothing to fear. Ever since the start of the war, the Blood Sword sect had never been defeated. This was the best proof. Moreover, their fear of the Blood Sword sect master lessened, and the shadow in their hearts dissipated. The fighting spirit that had previously dissipated was ignited once more. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2984. The Blood Sword sect master's plan had been exposed, and his heart was in turmoil. He stared at Ji Tianxing in disbelief, his eyes almost spitting fire. He had never thought that Ji Tianxing would guess his thoughts and plan. Even the spatial artifact and the time the experts of the Blood Sword sect would return was completely correct. It was as if Ji Tianxing could read his mind and read his thoughts and memories. At this moment, the Blood Sword sect master was even more wary of Ji Tianxing. He even felt a trace of fear in his heart, almost demonic in intelligence. These words suddenly appeared in the Blood Sword sect master's mind. This was his evaluation of Ji Tianxing. However, even if he had been exposed in front of everyone, he couldn't show his fear. After calming himself down, he still laughed contemptuously. "Ha, you little bastard, you're quite good at deceiving people. Your story is quite convincing. However, even if you have a glib tongue, it's useless. Today's battle still depends on strength." Ji Tianxing didn't waste any more time. He sneered. "That's right. There's no point in talking. Let's fight." After saying this, he sent a message to Xue Huan, Xue Long, and left emissary Jin. "Leave the Blood Sword sect master to me. Protect me and let them surround and kill the remaining members of the Blood Sword sect." Xue Huan, Xue Long, and left emissary Jin hurriedly nodded and followed him to the peak of the sacred mountain. At the same time, left emissary Jin gave orders to the 18 God Lords. The 18 God Lords personally piloted the battleships and fired at the blood-colored light barrier. This great battle with a great disparity in numbers had finally begun. Boom, boom, boom. Hundreds of cannon fire and light pillars rained down on the blood-colored light barrier like a storm. Shui Huan, Left Emissary Jin, and Left Emissary Jin also used their ultimate skills to slash at the blood-colored light barrier. Ji Tianxing even took out the Burial of Heaven and used his trump card, turning into a 1,000-foot-tall golden-armored war god. Heaven's splitting sword. He unleashed all of his power, holding the 800-meter-long Burial of Heaven sword with both hands, and slashed at the blood-red sky with all his might. Sensing his powerful divine might, the Blood Sword Sect Master's expression changed. He hurriedly used a secret technique to activate the Blood Sword's power. Buzz. The crimson sky began to tremble, and the crimson light became even denser. Its defensive power also doubled. The fear and unease in the hearts of the disciples and guards of the Blood Sword Sect gradually disappeared. Under the lead of a few elite disciples, they all rushed to the main hall not far away to activate various divine arrays. They wanted to use the formation to help the sect master of the Blood Sword Sect block the attacks of the Blood Blade Sect. Boom! An earth-shattering boom suddenly exploded between the heavens and the earth. The giant sword of Burial of Heaven, which was 8,000 feet long, slashed into the blood-colored sky, sending shards of blood-colored light flying everywhere. The 5-colored giant sword collapsed, and countless fragments of divine light splattered everywhere. But a 10,000-foot-long crack was slashed open in the blood-red skies. Strength crazily leaked out. The blood-colored giant sword hovering in the sky crazily trembled and actually let out a sorrowful cry. The Blood Sword Sect Master's mind was connected to the Blood Sword. The Blood Sword had been damaged, and he felt a stabbing pain in his heart. He let out a pained grunt. However, he felt even more shock and disbelief in his heart. Damn it! Where did that little bastard's sword come from? How could it damage this lord's blood sword? The blood sword had always been the life-bound divine artifact that he was most proud of. The way he saw it, the blood sword was a peak-quality divine artifact. After being refined by the blood-exchanging technique for 1,000 years, he had become one with the blood sword. This allowed the blood sword's quality and power to reach a whole new level. It was very close to a king-grade divine artifact. Unless a true king-grade divine artifact attacked, no divine artifact could shake his blood sword. But now, his pride had been shattered. The Blood Sword Sect Master suppressed his shock and formed hand seals with both hands, fully activating the power of the blood sword. The crack in the crimson sky was quickly repaired. However, the 18 battleships and the 3 Sir God experts continued their relentless attacks. Ji Tianxing held the Burial of Heaven with both hands and slashed down with all his strength. Heavenly Dragon World slash. Ji Tianxing roared as golden light surged out of his body. The Burial of Heaven also released a dazzling golden light, forming a 1,000-foot-long golden dragon that slashed at the sky. Boom! Crack! Another deafening explosion occurred at the peak of the Holy Mountain. A 10-mile-long gap was created in the blood-red sky, and shards of debris flew everywhere. The entire Holy Mountain shook violently, and several ravines appeared on the mountain. Countless rocks collapsed. Violent shockwaves swept up the dark red shards, creating a bloody flood in the sky. PFF, the Blood Sword Sect Master was also injured and spat out a mouthful of blood. The giant blood sword trembled, and a bloody light flashed crazily. Damn it! The Blood Sword Sect Master cursed angrily. He didn't care about healing his injuries and entered the blood sword without hesitation. With a flash of purple light, he fused with the giant blood sword. He used all his strength to use his ultimate skill, vowing to maintain the bloody sky and protect the Blood Sword Sect. No matter what, I have to hold on for 2 hours until reinforcements return. At that time, I will kill everyone in the Blood Blade Sect, not leaving even a chicken or a dog alive. Especially Tianxing. I'm going to extract his divine soul and torture him for 1,000 years. Only then will I be appeased. The Blood Sword Sect Master roared in his heart as he activated the power of the blood sword. Soon, Ji Tianxing slashed out a third time with all his strength. Sword piercing 9 heavens. he bellowed in a loud voice. Holding the Heavenburier sword with both hands, he fiercely thrust out his strongest sword. A dazzling golden sword light cut through the sky like a blazing sun and landed on the mountain peak, slashing at the bloody sky. The hole in the bloody sky didn't have time to heal in the first place. After being slashed by the divine golden sword, it could no longer hold on. Boom! Crack! Following a loud explosion that shook the universe, the gap was instantly torn apart. The hole extended to both ends and actually expanded tenfold, reaching a length of 10,000 feet. Moreover, countless cracks appeared around the hole, scattering countless fragments of bloody light. After a few breaths, a hole with a radius of 15 miles appeared. The bloody sky could no longer hold on after suffering such a heavy blow and soon fell apart. The blood sword wailed fiercely, flickering with bloody light. The blood sword sect master was also heavily injured, his divine power greatly reduced. But how can I lose to him? The blood sword sect master cried in his heart, filled with grief and indignation. But it was too late. Ji Tianxing, left emissary Jin, and Godlord Blood Illusion were the first to pass through the huge hole and reach the peak of the holy mountain. The four experts began a massacre, using earth-shattering divine abilities to cover the buildings on the mountain peak. Rumble! With a deafening explosion, the wide square and more than 20 magnificent palaces were blasted into ruins. Even the 50 disciples and more than 100 guards who had just fled the ruins in panic were killed by Ji Tianxing in 3 slashes. The 18 godlords controlled the divine battleships to unleash a barrage of cannon fire and light beams that rained down on the mountain peak. As a result, the entire mountain peak became a scene of desolation and chaos. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2985. In just 100 breaths, the Saint Mountain was blasted into pieces. The palaces and buildings on the mountain peak were all destroyed. The Saint Mountain, which was originally 1,000 feet tall, was now a 3,000 feet tall ruin. Many of the treasuries of the Blood Sword sect, as well as the secret passages and rooms inside the mountain, were also destroyed. The loss of the Blood Sword sect was immeasurable. It would be difficult for them to recover in 50 years. However, the earth-shattering battle was not over yet. The sky within a few hundred miles was still filled with smoke and dust. 18 divine lords surrounded the ruins of the Saint Mountain in their battleships and continued to bombard it. The goal of the Bloodblade sect was not as simple as destroying the Saint Mountain. They also wanted to raze the Saint Mountain to the ground and not leave a single intact stone for the Blood Sword sect. In the sky above the ruins, Ji Tianxing, Shui Huan, Shui Long and left emissary Jin were attacking the blood sword with all their might. The blood sword sect master had fused with the blood sword. It looked like a giant blood sword that was 1,000 feet tall. Showing off his ability, the bloody light soared to the heavens. The blood sword was extremely ghostly and nimble. It flashed and shuttled in the sky. Only Ji Tianxing could catch the trajectory of the blood sword and block its attack. Shui Huan, Shui Long and left emissary Jin could not defend against it. In the last moment, the blood sword had brushed past Divine Lord Shui Huan and sent him flying. The next moment, the blood sword appeared behind left emissary Jin. Left emissary Jin was shocked. He subconsciously teleported and dodged the blood sword's attack. However, 2 of the hundreds of dark red sword chi released by the blood sword hit him and made 2 bloody holes in his right leg. Left emissary Jin groaned in pain. Seeing this, Divine Lord Shui Long immediately teleported over to help him block the blood sword's attack. However, the blood sword crossed 50 miles and appeared above Divine Lord Shui Long's head and slashed down. Divine Lord Shui Long did not have time to dodge and was about to be cut in half. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing teleported over and blocked the blood sword's attack. In just 30 breaths, the 2 sides had exchanged more than 200 blows. Shui Huan, Shui Long, and left emissary Jin were all wounded by the blood sword. Their god power was drained rapidly, and their fighting abilities were weakening rapidly. The blood sword, on the other hand, was galloping freely between heaven and earth, flashing back and forth. The divine ability killer moves of the three divine lords could not harm the blood sword at all. Only Ji Tianxing was able to threaten the blood sword, injuring it 3 times and weakening its power a bit. However, the sect master of the blood sword sect was very smart and avoided Ji Tianxing as much as possible. His main targets were Shui Huan, Shui Long, and left emissary Jin. He wanted to kill the 3 monarchs first before slowly dealing with Ji Tianxing. In any case, the surrounding 10,000 miles were all forbidden dragon blood grounds with special standpoints. In this area, the blood sword could communicate with the divine power of heaven and earth, as well as the scattered divine dragon power in the ground. It could be said that his power was limitless and inexhaustible. As long as the blood sword was not defeated, the sect master of the blood sword sect would be invincible. Soon, both sides exchanged over 100 moves. God Lord Shui Long and left emissary Jin were injured twice by the blood sword, and their injuries were even more miserable. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing decisively sent a voice transmission to the 3 monarchs. I will deal with the blood sword. You guys retreat to the outer circle and form a formation to defend. Don't let him escape. Shui Long, God Lord Shui Huan, and left emissary Jin already had this idea. However, they did not want to let Ji Tianxing fight alone because they wanted to save face. Thus, they did not say anything. Since Ji Tianxing took the initiative to suggest it, the 3 of them naturally agreed. They sent a voice transmission in unison. Thank you, young Master Tianxing, for your understanding. Young Master Tianxing, you must be careful. Don't worry, we will definitely not let him escape. Soon, the 3 monarchs retreated from the battlefield to 100 miles away. The 3 of them each took out 12 monarch-grade divine artifacts and inserted them into the ground in all directions, starting to set up a formation together. They were going to set up a sky demon space locking formation to seal an area of 300 miles. This monarch-grade high-grade divine array required at least 2 monarchs to set up and spend 8 days to set it up. However, the 3 monarchs could greatly shorten the time needed to set it up. In addition, the ruins of the sacred mountain had already been reduced to dust, leaving behind only a huge crater. The 18 monarchs and 800 elite experts had nothing to do for the time being. It was obviously unrealistic to expect them to besiege the blood sword sect master. Thus, they all took action to help the 3 monarchs set up the formation. With the help of so many experts, the time needed to set up the formation could be shortened by dozens of times. God Lord Shui Huan was confident that he could set up the formation and seal the blood sword sect master within 2 hours. Swish, 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 swish. Everyone worked together and shot out divine light that covered the sky, creating the formation's network on the ground. In a short 30 minutes, the formation's foundation was formed. Then, everyone used all their strength to set up the formation, each of them displaying their strongest abilities. At this time, the battle between Ji Tianxing and the blood sword sect master had reached its climax. Although Ji Tianxing, who had transformed into a 1,000-meter-tall golden-armored war god, was already covered in wounds, his power was still as strong as ever. However, his power was still as violent as ever, as if he would never tire. As for the 1,000-meter-tall blood-red sword, it was also covered in wounds, with dozens of gaps. The blood-red light that the sword emitted was clearly much dimmer, and the sword intent was not as sharp and powerful as before. Without a doubt, the blood-red sword had been injured by Ji Tianxing, and the injuries were not light. The blood sword sect master had fused with the blood-red sword, so he was naturally injured as well. The blood sword sect master could not accept or believe this result. He found it very hard to believe that the monarch-grade high-grade blood-red sword had been injured by Ji Tianxing. This made him very suspicious. What grade was the pitch-black sword in Ji Tianxing's hand? Was it also a supreme-grade monarch-grade sword? Or perhaps a legendary king-grade divine artifact? Actually, Ji Tianxing was also very puzzled by this question. A long time ago, he had always thought that the Burial of Heaven sword made from origin stones was a heaven-grade divine artifact. After all, origin stones were more powerful than ordinary divine stones, and their origins were mysterious. It was understandable that the Burial of Heaven Sword's grade was higher than ordinary true God grade divine artifacts. However, he only realized after coming to the God realm. The Burial of Heaven Sword's grade was not as simple as Heavenly God grade. Even if it faced various monarch grade divine artifacts, it would still be able to forcefully clash with them, and it would not be at a disadvantage. This made Ji Tianxing very surprised. Could it be that the Burial of Heaven Sword had become a monarch grade divine artifact? All these years, the Burial of Heaven had been working hard to recover, and the results were actually so obvious? Today, the Burial of Heaven Sword had faced the supreme grade blood red sword. It was still not at a disadvantage. Not to mention how much the Burial of Heaven Sword was better than the blood red sword, it was at least evenly matched. Only now did Ji Tianxing realize that the Burial of Heaven Sword made from origin stones was actually comparable to a supreme grade monarch grade divine artifact. Of course, he was 100% sure that the Burial of Heaven Sword could only stop at monarch grade. It was definitely not a king grade divine artifact. This was because king grade divine artifacts were very special. They were extremely powerful divine artifacts that contain the principles of the Great Tao. Since it's not a king grade divine artifact, it's invincible among monarch grade divine artifacts. In that case, the Burial of Heaven Sword should be one of the strongest monarch grade divine artifacts. Chapter 2986. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The battle between Ji Tianxing and Sect Master Blood Sword had long since reached its most intense stage. Both sides had exchanged close to 10,000 moves, and all the divine abilities and skills they could use had been used once. Their divine power had been consumed too intensely, and they were almost completely exhausted. However, both of them were exceptionally talented. One had the support of the Blood Sword and the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land, and could still maintain 50% of his strength. The other had the Heaven Mending Pearl and the 5 Elements World to replenish his energy, and he would never tire. His divine power was always abundant, and his battle strength was always at its peak. Comparing the two, Sect Master Blood Sword's fate was naturally more miserable. The 3,000-meter-tall Blood Sword was already covered in cracks and gaps, as if it had grown a row of sawteeth. The blood light had dimmed, and its power was much weaker than before. In fact, the Blood Sword had become less offensive and more defensive. Most of the time, it was weary of blocking Ji Tianxing's attacks, and occasionally finding an opportunity to counterattack. Based on the current situation, Sect Master Blood Sword would be defeated in an hour at most. At that time, he would definitely die with his sword destroyed. However, Ji Tianxing was not satisfied with this result, and he was still anxious. An hour later, he would be able to defeat the Blood Sword and kill Sect Master Blood Sword. To him, this was simply too slow. Because he had been calculating the time. He had to kill Sect Master Blood Sword before the experts of Sect Master Blood Sword returned. Otherwise, the situation would become even more complicated, and Sect Master Blood Sword might take the opportunity to escape. Unfortunately, no matter how anxious he was, it was useless. Sect Master Blood Sword did not show himself at all, hiding in the Blood Sword like a turtle. Relying on the Blood Sword's protection, he could continue to stall for time. After all, the Blood Sword was a genuine supreme-grade monarch-grade divine artifact. It was only 2 hours, so he could hold on no matter what. Soon, another 30 minutes passed. Ji Tianxing's attacks did not weaken at all, and he continued to brandish the Burial of Heaven, sending out sky-covering sword lights to attack the Blood Sword. Sect Master Blood Sword's injuries were even more severe, and he was even weaker. However, he also understood. He had actually given up on resisting and breaking out of the encirclement, and changed to using all his strength to defend and defend. The 3,000-meter-long Blood Sword shrank to about 30 meters and entered the depths of the earth. Under the control of the Blood Sword Sect's Sect Master, the Blood Sword released invisible divine power and frantically absorbed the Dragon Blood divine power in the ground. At the same time, the Blood Sword Sect Master also used his Sword Dao divine ability to form an illusory sword net. An oval-shaped dark red sword net floated deep underground. No matter which angle Ji Tianxing attacked from, the sword net was able to block all of them. Even though the net of swords would constantly shatter and collapse if it received too many attacks. However, the sect master of the blood sword sect was constantly repairing the sword net and replenishing its defensive power. Even if the sword net would be broken through sooner or later, the blood sword would definitely shatter. But by doing so, he could stall for more time. Not to mention 2 hours, even 4 hours would not be a problem. Finally, 2 hours passed. A 7-colored light barrier with a radius of 300 miles appeared between heaven and earth, sealing this area. Shua! Ji Tianxing and the sect master of the blood sword sect were both sealed by the 7-colored light barrier. At this moment, left emissary Jin's voice sounded in Ji Tianxing's mind. Young Master Tianxing, we've already set up the Celestial Fiend Space Sealing Array and sealed off the area within a radius of 300 miles. Don't worry, we'll maintain the array and not let the Blood Sword Sect Master escape. Hearing this news, Ji Tianxing only let out a sigh of relief and was not very happy. This was because he could see that the Blood Sword Sect Master had no intention of escaping. The Blood Sword Sect Master probably still hadn't given up and wanted to wait for reinforcements to return so that he could make a comeback. The completion of the Celestial Fiend Space Sealing Array only served as a safeguard and did not have any substantial effect. You guys guard the array and prevent the reinforcements from returning. This sovereign will kill the Blood Sword Sect Master as soon as possible. Ji Tianxing transmitted to left emissary Jin. Then, he held the Sword of Burial of Heaven and used his Sword Dao divine ability to attack the blood sword deep underground. After fighting for so long, Ji Tianxing could already see some clues. The blood sword was deep underground and absorbing the mysterious dragon blood energy from the earth. It was precisely because of this that the blood sword's energy had not been exhausted, allowing Lin Shan to last until now. Ji Tianxing not only wanted to attack the blood sword, but also cut off the dragon blood energy. Thus, he used the law of earth and slashed out several giant swords. Bang, bang, bang. With a deafening explosion, the rock layer deep underground was cut into several pieces by the swords. With the blood sword as the center, the surroundings were cut open. The rock stratum where the blood sword was turned into an isolated island. The connection between the island and the land around it had been severed. It became abnormally difficult for the blood sword to absorb the dragon blood energy from the surroundings. This move was indeed effective. The blood sword was continuously attacked, and its energy was constantly being consumed. However, it could not be replenished, and its power was rapidly weakening. The blood sword sect master's injuries were becoming more and more miserable, and he was becoming more and more anxious. 15 minutes later, the blood sword had even more cracks, and its light was even dimmer. The blood sword sect master's injuries were also very severe, and he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Ji Tianxing sped up his attacks, wanting to defeat the blood sword and kill Lin Shan. But at this moment, outside the dragon blood forbidden ground, a dazzling white light lit up, and deafening battle cries resounded. The sudden turn of events alarmed everyone in the field. Ji Tianxing hurriedly released his divine sense to investigate the situation several thousand miles away. He saw a 3-story treasure ship that was 10,000 feet long. It was shining with divine light as it sped toward the dragon blood forbidden ground. This antique treasure ship was extremely ancient in design. It even looked a little shabby and was filled with an ancient aura. The masts and sails of the treasure ship were covered in cracks and holes. One could vaguely see 4,000 to 5,000 gods in different attire on the treasure ship. They came from different races and wore different attire, but they were loyal to the same faction. Most of these people were heavenly gods. They wielded weapons like sabers, spears, swords, halberds, and other strange weapons as they shouted with killing intent. At the top of the treasure ship were more than 20 divine lords in purple, gold, and black robes. They were all aggressive and filled with killing intent. They all held sabers and kenshin weapons in their hands. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned when he saw the appearance of these people. His eyes became serious. Damn it. 2 hours have just passed and they really came back. the Blood Sword Sect Master, who was heavily injured, was originally dispirited and suffering greatly in his heart. Suddenly, he heard the battle cries outside the forbidden ground, so he also released his divine sense. When he saw the ancient treasure ship, he immediately became spirited, and his dim eyes suddenly glowed with radiance. "Ha! You brats really didn't disappoint me. I've held on for so long and finally waited for you to come back. Kill all the bastards of the Blood Blade sect." At the same time, Shui Huan, Divine Lord Blood Dragon, Left Emissary Jean, and the others also used their divine sense to check the treasure ship. At first, they thought that the Blood Blade sect master had come with the elders and disciples to reinforce them. However, when they clearly saw the appearance of the treasured ship and those people, they immediately widened their eyes in shock and their expressions became extremely unsightly. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2987. Heavens! It's not the sect master or the elders. Damn it! It's the bastards of the Blood Sword sect. They came back so quickly. Logically speaking, the sect master and the elders should have arrived long ago. Why haven't they appeared yet? Shui Huan, Shui Long, and Left Emissary Jean were all filled with anxiety and worry. They watched as the ancient treasure ship quickly approached them. In 10 breaths at most, it would reach the Sky Demon Space Lock Array. Blood Illusion suppressed his shock and ordered, "Don't be in a daze. The reinforcements of the Blood Sword sect have returned. We must fight with all our strength. Block them outside the array. We can't let them stop young Master Tianxing from killing Lin Shan." Blood Dragon and Gold Left Emissary also calmed down and nodded in agreement. That's right. As long as we block the reinforcements of the Blood Sword sect, young Master Tianxing will be able to kill Lin Shan soon. Once Lin Shan is killed and Blood Sword is destroyed, the Blood Sword sect will be leaderless. Those dogs will also scatter. The 3 Divine Lords hurriedly ordered the 18 Divine Lords to fight. Bush, bush, bush. The 18 Divine Lords unsheathed their Kenshin weapons and formed a battle formation in the sky, staring at the treasure ship. In addition, more than 600 experts flew out of the 18 battleships and formed a battle formation in the sky. The remaining 200 experts stayed in the 18 battleships. They were responsible for controlling the battleships and forming a battle formation to fight against the treasure ship and the reinforcements of the Blood Sword sect. After a few breaths, the two sides engaged in close combat. The ancient treasure ship stopped when it was 10 miles away from the 7-colored barrier. Bush, bush, bush. More than 20 god monarchs led more than 4,000 elite experts and flew out of the treasure ship. They split into more than 20 groups and charged at the Blood Blade sect with murderous intent. The bastards of the Blood Blade sect invaded our forbidden grounds, destroyed our sacred mountain, and tried to besiege the sect master. Today we must kill them all and let their blood flow like a river. Blood Sword sect disciples, listen up. Kill the bastards of the Blood Blade sect at all costs. Anyone who kills one will be rewarded with 100,000 divine stones. Whoever kills the enemy's divine sovereign will be rewarded with a monarch-level divine ability, a divine artifact, and 10 billion divine stones. At the very front of the Blood Sword sect's group were 2 white-haired old men, their voices as loud as bells. They were the first elder and second elder of the Blood Sword sect. Their words greatly motivated the experts of the Blood Sword sect, causing their blood to boil and their fighting spirit to soar. As the saying goes, when there's a great reward, there's bound to be brave men. The sky-high bounty that head elder offered made everyone's eyes turn red from excitement. They became even more ferocious as they charged towards the people of the Blood Blade sect like bloodthirsty demonic beasts. Boom! Pang ping ping! Rumble! In the next moment, both sides clashed fiercely, colliding with each other and exploding with a loud bang. Thousands of divine abilities and secret arts burst forth with dazzling divine light, illuminating the heaven and earth for thousands of miles. All sorts of saber lights, sword shadows, and mountainous beasts clashed in the sky, shattering into pieces. The 18 divine battleships also shot out several hundred beams of light, which rained down on the Blood Sword sect members. Millions of shards of divine light were swept away by the violent shockwaves and scattered in every direction. Chaotic and violent gales swept across the battlefield, sweeping across 3,000 miles. In just a single clash, both sides had suffered massive casualties. More than 60 disciples of the Bloodblade sect had been killed on the spot. The Blood Sword sect's experts had also suffered nearly 100 casualties. However, the auras of the two sides were completely different. The Bloodblade sect had their backs against the Celestial Demon's spatial lock array. They could only resist the charge of the Blood Sword sect, unable to retreat. Moreover, the number of enemies they were facing was 5 times their number. Unless a miracle occurred, they would undoubtedly lose this battle. Moreover, all of them would die on the spot. On the other hand, the Blood Sword sect's casualties were even heavier, but their morale was as high as a rainbow, their killing intent soaring. They had only suffered nearly 100 casualties, while they had more than 4,000 people. Even if they maintained this casualty rate, they would be able to quickly kill off the Bloodblade sect members. Once the Bloodblade sect members were all dead, they would still have 3,000 people left. What was there to fear? This was an unfair battle to begin with. Boom boom boom. Pang peng peng. The bitter battle continued. Over 40 Divine Lord powerhouses from both sides were fighting high up in the sky. The Celestial God Realm disciples and experts, on the other hand, were charging and breaking through the enemy lines at low altitudes. Even though the 600 disciples of the Bloodblade sect had 18 divine ships supporting them, they had relied on the power of the divine ships to block the first 3 waves of attacks from the Blood Sword sect. However, when the Blood Sword sect's experts controlled the ships and unleashed a barrage of divine cannons, the Bloodblade sect's disciples suffered a calamity. With each passing second, the number of Bloodblade sect disciples rapidly decreased. Corpses after corpses were blasted to pieces by the divine light, causing a rain of blood to splatter. The Bloodblade sect's disciples grew more and more terrified, their fighting intent constantly dwindling. After 10 breaths of time, they had lost more than 200 people. The remaining 400 disciples were completely suppressed and could only do their utmost to resist. Seeing this, the Blood Sword sect's disciples became even more arrogant and charged even more valiantly. High in the sky, Divine Lord Blood Illusion's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he saw this. He anxiously shouted, "Left Emissary Jin, quickly ask young Master Xianxia why he still hasn't killed Lin Shan. Our disciples won't be able to last much longer. They'll all be killed soon." Left Emissary Jin was also anxious. He hurriedly replied, "That old bastard Lin Shan is hiding in the Blood Sword sect. Young Master Xianxia can't do anything to him. Even if young Master Xianxia uses all his strength, he'll still need an hour to kill him." An hour? Divine Lord Blood Dragon felt his vision darken. He was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. By that time, our disciples will have all been killed. Even the 3 of us will be surrounded by thousands of people from the Blood Sword sect. We won't be able to keep our lives. Left Emissary Jin was in a dilemma. He tried asking, "Then what do we do? We can't ask young Master Xianxia to give up on Lin Shan and help us block the reinforcements of the Blood Sword sect, right?" "Impossible." Divine Lord Blood Illusion shouted resolutely and angrily, "Don't forget that our original intention of establishing the Bloodblade sect was to kill Lin Shan. As long as we can kill that old dog, we won't hesitate to sacrifice the entire Bloodblade sect." Left Emissary Jin was startled. He felt great pain in his heart. His eyes were filled with hesitation and struggle. At this moment, at the edge of the forbidden area thousands of miles away, a 5-colored divine light that blotted out the sky lit up again. There was a vast and vigorous divine power that was approaching them at lightning speed. Many divine lords sensed the abnormality and released their divine senses to investigate. The next moment, they discovered that there was a divine ship as black as ink at the edge of the forbidden area. It was speeding over at lightning speed. There was clearly a huge symbol of the blood blade on the ferocious-looking divine ship. Seeing this scene, The experts of the Blood Sword sect frowned. Their expressions became grave and fearful. As for Divine Lord Blood Illusion, Blood Dragon, and Left Emissary Jean, they heaved a sigh of relief. They were pleasantly surprised. Sect Master has finally arrived. Great! Sect Master has finally arrived. Those bastards of the Blood Sword sect are dead for sure. Mobile version update website. Chapter 2988. The divine ship that had arrived late was the Blood Blade Sect Master's ship. It rarely showed its face. However, it was a genuine monarch-grade, high-grade divine ship. In a short 5 breaths, it arrived near the 7-colored barrier and above the battlefield. Bam, 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 bam. Before the people on the divine ship had even appeared, countless cannons fired hundreds of scarlet flame pillars. Each scarlet flame pillar was 3,000 feet long and contained enough power to destroy heaven and earth. Boom, boom, boom. Scarlet pillars of light that blotted out the sky and covered the earth rained down on the Blood Sword sect's battle formation. The ancient ship was engulfed, and the 300 or so elites were also swallowed by the scarlet flames. Along with an earth-shattering explosion, a loud noise burst out. A few enormous holes were blasted open on the ancient treasured vessel on the spot, causing fragments to spray out into the sky, and it was on the verge of collapse. 80% of the 300 or so elites were killed on the spot. Only a few dozen experts were still alive, but all of them had severed limbs, and their injuries were horrible to look at. The morale of the Blood Sword sect took a huge hit. On the other hand, the disciples of the Blood Blade sect cheered and cheered. At this moment, a large group of figures flew out of the Black Divine ship. There were 6 God Lords and over 1,000 Sky God Realm experts. The person in the lead was a graceful figure with a head full of white hair. She had a beautiful face and a seductive temperament. She had the appearance of a 28-year-old girl, the charm and gentleness of a 30-year-old girl, and the dignity and vicissitudes of a middle-aged woman. In short, her temperament was very complicated and special. She was wearing a long purple dress, and her bare feet were like jade as she walked through the air. Her clothes fluttered in the wind, and her waist-length white hair danced in the wind. She was indescribably bewitching and beautiful. She held a blood-colored saber that was 10 feet long and shaped like a crescent moon in her hands. This saber had a very special shape and contained a frightening and mysterious aura. The smooth arc of the blade flickered with a translucent blood-red light, as if it was alive. Everyone on the battlefield had complicated expressions when they saw the white-haired woman and the blood-colored saber. The people of the Blood Sword sect were extremely wary, while the people of the Blood Blade sect cheered. Because she was the leader of the Blood Blade sect. The outside world had many guesses about her and gave her many nicknames. White-haired Demon Blade, Blood Blade Demoness, Blood Blade Demoness, Bloodthirsty Demoness, and so on. It was obvious. None of the nicknames were positive. All of them were promoting her cruelty, bloodthirstiness, and viciousness. As expected. Demonic blade Wang Lin streaked across the sky like a bloody light, heading straight for the Sky Demon Space Sealing Array. Those who block me die. With a roar filled with killing intent, she waved the blood saber in her hand and slashed out dozens of blood-colored blades of light at the 100 Blood Sword sect disciples in front of her. The hundreds of disciples who had formed a battle formation had no time to dodge. Pung pung pung, a series of muffled sounds exploded, and everyone was shredded into pieces by the blood-red light blade. A dark red rain of blood fell from the sky, emitting a nauseating stench of blood. Demon Blade Lin Shui didn't dodge. She passed through the blood rain and continued to rush towards the 7-colored light shield. Another 3 Sir Gods blocked her path. She held the blood saber with both hands and turned it into a bloody hurricane, violently sweeping over. Pung ping ping. The bloody hurricane violently crushed the Sir Gods of the Blood Sword sect, causing their flesh and blood to splatter everywhere. They screamed and flew backwards. One of them was killed on the spot, his godhead shattered. The other 3 were lucky not to die, but they were severely injured and their bodies were incomplete. Swish! Demon Blade Lin Shui finally crossed the sky and landed beside Blood Illusion and Left Emissary Jean. Sir Blood Illusion and Left Emissary Jean were filled with excitement as they hurriedly bowed. "Greetings, Sect Master." "Sect Master, you're finally here." Demon Blade Lin Shui didn't exchange greetings with them and directly asked in a deep voice, "How's the situation? Where's young Master Tianxing?" Left Emissary Jean hurriedly explained, "We can't help young Master Tianxing deal with Lin Shan, so we set up the Sky Demon Space Sealing Array and sealed off the surrounding 300 miles. Lin Shan, that old dog, is holed up in the Blood Sword, planning to resist until the end. Young Master Tianxing can't do anything to him for the time being. He needs at least an hour to defeat the Blood Sword and kill Lin Shan." Even so, Lin Shui was still shocked when she heard this. Her silver eyes were filled with disbelief. He actually won against Lin Shan in a one-on-one battle? He forced Lin Shan to hold up in the Blood Sword? That's right. Young Master Tianxing is far stronger than we imagined. Sir Blood Illusion hurriedly said, "Sect Master, enter the array and help young Master Tianxing kill Lin Shan. With the help of the elders, reverends, and disciples, we can block the reinforcements of the Blood Sword sect." Lin Shui glanced back. A few elders and consecrators were leading thousands of experts to fight bravely. More than 30 disciples stayed in the divine ship and were crazily bombarding the Blood Sword sect's battle array. Although the Blood Sword sect had thousands of people, they were surrounded by enemies and their morale was unstable. The Blood Blade sect could hold on for a short period of time. Thus, Lin Shui nodded and said, "Okay, hold on for a while longer. I'll go and kill that useless dog Lin Shan now." After saying this, she passed through the 7-colored light barrier and entered the array. As soon as she entered the array, she saw that the ground within 300 miles had turned into ruins. The once majestic sacred mountain was gone, and all she could see were deep pits and ravines. This made her very excited and happy. She hurriedly released her divine sense to search for traces of Ji Tianxing and Lin Shan. In the end, Ji Tianxing and the Blood Sword were fighting deep underground. The Blood Sword had shrunk to about 10 feet, and its light was dim. It was very weak. Ji Tianxing's aura was still as imposing as before. His divine power was abundant, and his battle prowess was formidable. Seeing the situation, Lin Shui was even more shocked. Her silver eyes seemed to see through the earth as she stared at Ji Tianxing. Heavens! What is this kid's background? He had fought Lin Shan one-on-one and had only suffered light injuries. He was still in peak condition. But he severely injured Lin Shan and only relied on the Blood Sword to preserve his life? Such a perverted guy. I've never seen him before, but I'm working with him? Lin Shui was a little dazed. She was so shocked that she was a little dazed. Before she saw Ji Tianxing with her own eyes, she didn't feel so shocked. Now that she saw it with her own eyes, she felt like she was in a dream and didn't dare to believe it. A thought even flashed through her mind. Is it because the heavens care for me? Seeing that my fate is full of misfortune, they sent him to avenge me? Just as she was in a daze, a low and indifferent voice sounded in her mind. The Blood Sword is special. Only your Blood Sword can counter it. Lend me your Blood Sword, and I guarantee that you'll kill Lin Shan within 10 breaths. Without a doubt, the person who transmitted the voice was Ji Tianxing. Lin Shui immediately frowned and wanted to refuse. What kind of joke was this? The Blood Sword was passed down to her by her father, and she had long refined it into her natal divine weapon. This was the most important thing in her life. How could she lend it to a stranger? However, Lin Shui swallowed the words that she was about to blurt out. "I guarantee that you'll kill Lin Shan within 10 breaths," was too confident and domineering. It shocked her. For some reason, her right hand didn't listen to her and hit the Blood Sword into the ground. Swoosh! The Blood Sword turned into a red light and landed in front of Ji Tianxing. At this time, Ji Tianxing had already returned to his original appearance. He was holding the Burial of Heaven and fiercely attacking the Blood Sword. He held the Blood Sword in his left hand and the Burial of Heaven in his right hand. "Burial of Heaven, lend me a hand." He used his divine soul to transmit his voice to the Burial of Heaven. Then, he clapped his palms together and combined the blood sword and the burial of heaven. Swoosh! At that moment, the blood sword emitted a bloody light that shot into the sky, and the burial of heaven burst forth with endless black light. The sword and the blade had strangely merged. Mobile version update website. Chapter 2989. Lin Shui was dumbfounded by this scene. Her eyes widened as she stared at the ground with her mouth agape. Her expression and eyes were filled with disbelief. He actually melted my blood blade? Shui Lin was a little absent-minded and felt her mind go blank. At the same time, the blood sword sect master was also shocked. He had already been heavily injured and was at the end of his rope. He was only able to block Ji Tianxing's ferocious attacks by relying on the blood sword's support and his all-out defense. But he knew very well that in at most an hour, his sword would be destroyed and he would die. Moreover, only the blood blade could counter the blood sword. These two supreme-grade monarch-grade divine artifacts were originally a set, divided into yin and yang and male and female. The two complemented each other but also countered each other. Back then, in the hands of Divine Lord Wufa and his wife, this pair of swords could display their strongest power and was almost invincible. However, in the hands of Lin Shan and Lin Shui, the two swords became mortal enemies. Lin Shan was also a bit worried that Lin Shui would use the blood blade to counter him. If that happened, he would not even be able to last an hour and would die. In the end, what he was worried about really happened. What was even more shocking was that Lin Shui actually gave the blood blade to Ji Tianxing. And Ji Tianxing actually fused the blood blade with his divine sword. What kind of operation was this? Lin Shan was very confused and had a bad premonition. Not good. That kid wants to use the power of the blood blade to defeat my blood sword. This thought flashed through his mind, and Lin Shan did not dare to hold on anymore and ran without hesitation. The dark red blood sword turned into a bloody light and flew through the ground, escaping to the edge of the seven-colored light barrier. Obviously, Lin Shan wanted to get rid of Ji Tianxing and escape into the blood sword sect's battle formation. He wanted the experts of the blood sword sect to delay Ji Tianxing and Lin Shui to create a chance for him to escape. Winning or losing was no longer important. As long as he could escape the dragon blood forbidden land and keep his life, it would be fortunate. This was Lin Shan's only thought. However, when the burial of heaven and the blood saber successfully merged, Ji Tianxing was destined to die the moment he made his move. Settle the 8 desolations. Ji Tianxing waved his left hand and pressed his palm into the ground. Instantly, the ground within a radius of several thousand miles was controlled and solidified. The incomparably strong resistance firmly suppressed the blood sword, causing it to be stuck in the underground rock stratum, unable to move. Then, Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and slashed with all his might. The appearance of the burial of heaven sword that had fused with the blood blade had undergone subtle changes. The blade of the sword was no longer perfectly straight. Instead, it was curved like a crescent moon and shone even more coldly. A few scarlet veins could be seen on the pitch-black blade, as if fresh blood was flowing through them. This sword had become even more mysterious, and its power had also increased by 2 times. Boom! The black and red sword light sliced through the ground without any obstruction and hit the blood sword. Following a thunderous explosion, the blood sword was sent flying on the spot. Blood splattered everywhere, and a loud explosion shook the heavens. The destructive shockwave blasted a massive crater with a radius of tens of thousands of feet. This caused the ground within a radius of several thousand miles to tremble violently. The blood sword fell into the rock stratum, its blood light flickering unsteadily, and its aura becoming chaotic. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that a gap had appeared on the blade of the blood sword, and several cracks had extended from it. A powerful dragon blood divine power was rapidly dissipating. After suffering such a heavy blow, not only was the blood sword injured, Lin Shan's injuries were even more miserable. Even his divine soul was shaken to the point of dizziness, and his consciousness became hazy. Soon he came back to his senses. Without hesitation, he drove the blood sword out of the ground and fled towards the south. This time, he had learned his lesson. Knowing that Ji Tianxing had grasped the laws of Earth, he did not flee underground, and instead flew into the sky. However, this could not change the outcome. Ji Tianxing crossed 100 miles in one step, instantly catching up to the blood sword, and slashing down again. Duanren border! The burial of heaven's sword fell from the sky, and slashed down with a black and red sword 100 zhang long. This enormous sword light contained the aura of death unique to the burial of heaven's sword, and the unique Yao power of the blood sword. The blood sword did its best to dodge the enormous sword, but it was too late. With another boom, a loud explosion shook the 9 heavens. The burial of heaven's sword's slash was the same as the previous one, at the gap in the blade. The blood sword could no longer endure the wild power, and was cut in two. Crack! The blood sword broke in the middle, and dozens of dark red shards flew out. Dark red blood energy filled the sky. The 2 broken blades were sent flying, rolling and stabbing into the ground, trembling incessantly. After suffering such a heavy blow, the blood sword was almost destroyed. Lin Shan had been cut in half at the waist. His injuries were terrible, and his divine soul was even weaker. However, he did not give up. He was only a few dozen li away from the 7-colored light barrier in the south. Enduring his heavy injuries, he used his mind to control the 2 broken swords, and used all his strength to fly toward the 7-colored light barrier. As long as he passed through the light barrier, he would be able to enter the battlefield. At that time, with the cover of the experts of the blood sword sect, he would be able to escape. However, the 2 broken swords had just flown into the sky when Ji Tianxing attacked again. Heaven-piercing sword. With a low roar, he held the burial of heaven's sword with both hands, and used 120% of his strength to slash at the broken sword. Crack! Following a crisp cracking sound, the broken sword with a hilt was cut in half once again. The broken sword fell to the ground and was buried in the dust of the ruins. Ji Tianxing directly ignored the broken sword with the tip of the sword, because he knew that Lin Shan was hiding in the hilt. As expected, the broken sword was cut in half again, and Lin Shan's injuries were even worse. He knew that it was impossible for him to escape with the broken sword. So, he escaped from the broken sword. He forced his battered body to turn into a streak of bloodlight and continued to flee to the south. Ji Tianxing had expected him to do this and was already prepared to wait for him. Lin Shan had just flown tens of thousands of meters when the burial of heaven's sword released a dazzling bloody light and slashed down. Bang! A deafening muffled sound suddenly exploded between the heavens and the earth, reverberating endlessly. Under the dark red bloody light, Lin Shan's broken divine body could be clearly seen being cut in half by the burial of heaven's sword. The 2 halves of the body couldn't withstand the violent power and actually exploded, splashing blood and debris into the sky. Lin Shan's divine body was destroyed, and he was seriously injured and on the verge of death. But his willpower was incomparably strong, and he still refused to give up struggling. Whoosh! A walnut-sized dark red divine spark flew out of the bloody rain and fled as fast as lightning. Ji Tianxing had already blocked in front of him, waiting for him to walk into the trap. He stretched out his left hand, and a golden heaven-capturing dragon claw directly grabbed Lin Shan's divine spark. At this point, the battle was over. Lin Shan fell into Ji Tianxing's hands, and his life and death were no longer in his control. Lin Shui watched the entire process dumbfoundedly, and the shock in her heart was indescribable. She silently calculated the time. It was exactly 10 breaths. Chapter 2990. From the fusion of the burial of heaven's sword and the blood blade to Ji Tianxing killing Lin Shan and capturing his godhead. The process was very intense and thrilling. It sounded long, but in reality, it was only 10 breaths of time. Ji Tianxing was a man of his word, and he did as he said. From the beginning to the end, Lin Shui was in shock and witnessed the entire process with her own eyes. She couldn't help and only watched the entire battle. She didn't have the opportunity to attack and was so shocked that she forgot to help. This made her feel a little embarrassed. I'm a high divine lord after all. Even if I can't beat you and Lin Shan, I'm qualified to interfere in this battle and help. And the result? You only used 10 breaths of time to finish off Lin Shan. Wouldn't it be stupid for me to become a spectator? Thinking of this, Lin Shui frowned and was very unhappy. However, another thought occurred to her. Although I didn't help, I lent you my life artifact. You being able to get rid of Lin Shan is also thanks to me. Moreover, my original intention of establishing the Blood Blade sect and my unchanging belief for 1,000 years is to kill Lin Shan and take revenge. Now that I've taken revenge, I should be happy. Shui Lin's brows relaxed. Suddenly, the sky cleared up and she was filled with joy. Swoosh! She hurriedly flew across the sky and came to Ji Tianxing's side, looking at his left hand expectantly. Lin Shan isn't dead yet, right? Where's his godhead? Ji Tianxing held the burial of Heaven sword in his right hand and held it behind his back. His left hand clenched into a fist and slowly stretched out in front of Lin Shui. After spreading out his 5 fingers, a dark red godhead appeared in his palm. It was Lin Shan. However, Lin Shan's godhead was dim and his divine power was weak. Its surface was covered with cracks. Just now, Ji Tianxing grabbed his godhead and crushed it a few times, resulting in this result. Now, Lin Shan's soul was almost shattered and he was in a coma. He wouldn't wake up in a short period of time. I'm sorry, I destroyed his body and only captured his godhead. If we can capture him in one piece and hand him over to you, then we will have completed our mission. Ji Tianxing said calmly and handed the godhead to Shui Lin. I'll leave his godhood to you. After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. Shui Lin stretched out her hands and held Lin Shan's godhead, standing there in a daze. She should have been overjoyed and relieved of a heavy burden. But for some reason, her attention wasn't on Lin Shan's godhead. She was actually staring at Ji Tianxing's back. This brat is so young, yet he already has such powerful strength. He's simply unfathomable. Moreover, he was so decisive and cold in his actions, and there was also an indescribable mysterious temperament. Who knows how many innocent young girls will be captivated by him? Shui Lin's eyes were unfocused as she watched him leave. These thoughts flashed through her mind and she couldn't help but sigh. After a while, she came back to her senses and frowned. Bah! You old witch, what nonsense are you thinking about? Shui Lin was a little ashamed, her cheeks inexplicably hot. She thought that she was a bloodthirsty and heartless witch who had long lost her feelings. Who knew that she would actually have such messy thoughts just now? Although she didn't have any thoughts of crossing the line, the appearance of these 7 emotions and 6 desires made her feel even more ashamed. She lowered her head and glanced at Lin Shan's godhead. She clenched her fists and put it into the interspatial ring. When she raised her head again, her eyes and temperament had already returned to coldness and indifference. Hey! Wait! Shui Lin looked at Ji Tianxing's back and shouted loudly. 30 miles away, Ji Tianxing, who was walking on air, stopped. Without turning his head, he asked in an indifferent tone, "What else?" Shui Lin's figure flashed and teleported 30 miles, appearing in front of him. She frowned and stared at him, asking with an unhappy expression, "You said that you would only borrow my blood knife. Now that you've used it, shouldn't you return the blood knife?" This was serious business. He absolutely couldn't forget. He had to give an explanation. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a calm expression, "You saw it just now. Your blood knife has already merged with my divine sword." Shui Lin's brows furrowed even tighter. She secretly clenched her fists in anger and shouted, "Then you mean you can't return it?" Ji Tianxing thought about it seriously and nodded. "That seems to be the case." Shui Lin snorted and said even more angrily, "That's the divine knife my father passed down to me, the natal divine weapon that he cultivated with his life. You didn't give me a heads up and just merged it, you have to compensate me." Ji Tianxing blinked and said very honestly, "I told you that I wanted to borrow your blood knife. You only gave it to me after you agreed, didn't you?" Shui Lin choked and glared at him. I thought you only wanted to use it for a while. Who knew that you would use it all? Ji Tianxing spread his hands, expressing helplessness. Shui Lin wrinkled her nose and said fiercely, "Don't try to cheat, you have to think of a way to compensate me." Ji Tianxing thought for a while and pointed at her hand and the ruins not far away. He said, "Lin Shan's godhead will be your compensation. If you think it's not enough, there are 3 pieces of the sword in the ruins. You can think of a way to put them back together, they should still be usable." This. Shui Lin was startled, thinking that this result was not unacceptable. In fact, as long as she could kill Lin Shan and take revenge, even if she had to sacrifice the blood knife and the entire blood knife sect, she would have no regrets. However, she just couldn't stand Ji Tianxing's behavior. He was cold and arrogant, as if everything was right. This made her very unhappy. Seeing that she was silent, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "If there's no problem, then I'll leave?" Shui Lin frowned and didn't answer. Ji Tianxing asked again, "I'm really leaving?" Shui Lin glared at him and waved her hand. "Forget it, I'm not going to bicker with a little guy like you. You can go. However, don't announce Lin Shan's defeat for now. Otherwise, those dogs of the Blood Sword sect will definitely scatter and flee, and I won't be able to catch them all in one fell swoop." Ji Tianxing was a little surprised and asked with a playful smile, "Oh, weren't you very angry just now and insisting that I compensate you? Why are you suddenly so open-minded and willing to let me go?" Shui Lin glanced at him and said with a sad expression, "Originally, I founded the Blood Knife sect to deal with the Blood Sword sect and kill that bastard Lin Shan. Now that both the Blood Sword sect and Lin Shan have been destroyed, I have no more regrets. As for the blood knife and sword, they're just worldly possessions. If they're gone, then so be it. After today's battle, I have no more worries and can retire with peace of mind." Ji Tianxing rubbed his nose and suddenly revealed a mischievous smile. "Sorry, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you." As he spoke, he flipped his right hand and a bloody light flashed in his palm. Shui Lin's crescent moon-like blood knife appeared in his palm in perfect condition. Losing the blood knife and recovering it, Shui Lin glared at Ji Tianxing angrily. "You brat! You dare to trick me?" Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 2991. Lin Shui was furious. In just a short while, her emotions fluctuated. She glared fiercely at Ji Tianxing, having the urge to strangle him. She thought the blood blade was still there, but it was gone. She thought it was gone and comforted herself. In the end, the blood blade appeared again. Wasn't this a deliberate prank? Ji Tianxing looked at her with a smile and said sincerely, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I just wanted to see if you're as obsessed and bloodthirsty as the legends say." And the result? Lin Shui glanced at him, still not giving him a good look. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "The result is obvious. You're obsessed, but you haven't become a demon. You're just a poor woman with a deep blood feud." This was a very fair evaluation. For nearly 1,000 years, Lin Shui lived only for revenge, and her obsession was deep in her bones. However, she only hated the Blood Sword sect and Lin Shan, not bloodthirsty and cruel. But Ji Tianxing's words stimulated Lin Shui's nerves. Like a cat with its hair standing on end, she glared at Ji Tianxing and snapped, "What did you just say? Just a poor woman with a deep blood feud. That's it? Little brat. How old are you? Don't pretend to be deep in front of me. I've killed more people than you've seen." Lin Shui put away the blood blade and glared at Ji Tianxing angrily with her hands on her hips. She looked like she was teaching a junior a lesson. Seeing her reaction, Ji Tianxing suddenly wanted to laugh. "Forget it, I won't bicker with you." He shook his head, chuckled and turned to leave. Lin Shui was even angrier at his attitude. She followed him and shouted, "What do you mean? What's with that expression? Is it disdain? Are you looking down on me? Don't think that you're mysterious and amazing just because you're young and strong. Don't think that I'll be grateful to you and give myself to you just because you helped me take revenge. Stop right there. I'm going to teach you a lesson today and make you understand something. Although you are a monster, a genius, and an outstanding person, you have to understand the basic manners of a person, and you can't look down on women. Lin Shui followed Ji Tianxing all the way to the edge of the array. Ji Tianxing felt a headache coming on. He quickly changed the topic and said seriously, "They're still fighting outside. The Blood Blade sect's disciples won't be able to hold on much longer." The people of the Blood Sword sect didn't know what had happened inside the Grand Formation, nor did they know that Lin Shan had already been defeated. "I can't show myself. Otherwise, when they guess that Lin Shan is defeated, they will scatter. How about this? I'll leave while you go and kill the remaining members of the Blood Sword sect. If there's anything else, just send me a message." After hurriedly giving out instructions, he passed through the 7-colored light barrier and left the grand array without looking back. Sure enough, the battle was still going on in the forbidden area outside the formation. The Blood Sword sect had the upper hand, and more than 4,000 people were attacking the Blood Blade sect. The people of the Blood Blade sect held on bitterly, and their numbers continued to dwindle. Ji Tianxing used the Armillary Heaven's secret art, entered a state of invisibility, and flew toward the south. Lin Shui followed him out of the grand array. Without looking at the battlefield, she hurriedly sent a message to him, "The battle is about to end. Where are you going?" Ji Tianxing flew through the sky without looking back and replied, "I'm going to the royal capital to take care of business." Lin Shui frowned and asked somewhat unwillingly, "You've helped this old lady so much. This old lady must properly thank you and reward you with treasures and wealth. Can't you stay a few more days and come back to the Blood Blade sect with this old lady?" This time, Ji Tianxing did not reply. He had already flown far away. Lin Shui stood in place and looked toward the southern horizon, stomping her feet in annoyance. "Humph! You don't know what's good for you. This old lady was planning to give you half of the Blood Blade sect, but you don't want it. Don't think that just because this old lady is indebted to you, this old lady will pester you and repay you." She muttered angrily, but no one could hear her. Suppressing her anger, she looked at the nearby battlefield and immediately erupted with a frightening killing intent. "Bastards of the Blood Blade sect, all of you must die." Lin Shui roared with killing intent. Dragging the long and narrow blood blade with both hands, she charged into the battlefield like a streak of blood-colored light. Bush, bush, bush. Blade light filled the sky and a blood-colored hurricane swept out. Several dozen experts of the Blood Blade sect were immediately dismembered by the bloody hurricane, turning into a rain of blood and flesh. When this blood blade which entered the battlefield, the end of the Blood Blade sect had arrived. An entire hour later, the battle in the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land finally came to an end. The result was without suspense. More than 4,000 experts of the Blood Blade sect and more than 20 divine lords had all died in battle. The land within a radius of thousands of miles was covered in broken limbs and blood. There were also fragments of treasure ships, weapons, and armor. The Forbidden Land was a scene of desolation, with deep pits and ravines everywhere. The bloody light and bloody mist that blotted out the sky lasted for 3 days before dispersing. After the battle ended, Lin Shui returned to her ship to rest. After killing more than 1,000 people, her body was filled with a terrifying stench of blood, as if she was a god of death. The guards in the hall were all extremely respectful to her. 15 minutes passed. Left envoy Jin, who was in charge of checking the battle results, returned to the hall and reported to Lin Shui. "Congratulations, sect leader. Congratulations, sect leader. Our sect obtained a complete victory in this battle and killed nearly 5,000 experts of the Blood Blade sect, including 23 divine lords. Only one Sir God and more than 50 experts managed to escape in the chaos with heavy injuries. However, the Blood Dragon Right envoy has already led people to pursue them. I believe that there will be good news soon. At that time, the remnants of the Blood Blade sect will all be wiped out. After this battle, not only will we be able to avenge you, but our sect will also replace the Blood Blade sect as the 5th great sect." Lin Shui calmly listened to his report. She only paid attention to the first half of the report and was not interested in the second half. "How are the casualties of our sect?" Left Envoy Jin was startled for a moment before he lowered his head and replied, "Reporting to Sect Master, the number of our disciples is 5 times less than the Blood Blade sect. Therefore, the casualties of our sect are slightly greater. More than 160 elite disciples died in battle, and more than 600 experts died in battle. Even out of the 18 Sir Gods, 7 of them had perished. However, their sacrifice was worth it to successfully exterminate the Blood Blade sect." Lin Shui nodded slightly and ordered, "Left Envoy Jin, you are in charge of the rewards of the meritorious disciples and the compensation of the injured disciples. According to the sect's previous rules, give the meritorious disciples and the injured disciples 10 times the reward and compensation." 10 times? Left Envoy Jin was stunned and his eyes widened in disbelief. The rules of the Blood Blade sect were very humane and valued friendship. If an elite disciple died in battle, his family would receive 5 million godstones as compensation. If it was 10 times the compensation, it would be 50 million godstones. Left Envoy Jin's heart twitched and his hands trembled. He wanted to howl in grief. "Sect Master, even if you have taken revenge and are in a good mood, you can't be so willful. With 10 times the compensation, our sect's treasury will be emptied and we will soon go bankrupt." Mobile version update website. The purpose of the Blood Blade sect's existence was to deal with the Blood Sword sect, even though the two of them were already mentally prepared. But when they heard the sect master announce the news in front of everyone, their hearts still felt heavy and uncomfortable. After waiting for a while, Shui Lin explained the reason. "Other than the vice sect leader and left emissary Jin, the others may not know that I founded the Blood Blade sect for revenge. Now that I've gotten my revenge, the evil beast Lin Shan has also fallen into my hands. My wish has been fulfilled, so I have no more worries. I just want to live in seclusion and stay away from the disputes and slaughter in the mortal world. However, please rest assured that I will distribute all of the Blood Blade sect's assets to those who have contributed greatly. This way, we won't let down everyone's dedication to the sect for so many years." After speaking, Shui Lin stood up from the throne and said in a serious tone, "Everyone, I have made up my mind. No one needs to persuade me anymore." The elders and deacons looked at each other and discussed secretly. Their hearts were heavy and complicated. At this moment, 2 deacons knelt on the ground and said with a sobbing tone, "Sect leader, the Blood Blade sect is the result of all of us spending half of our lives. Without the Blood Blade sect, we will be lonely ghosts in the future. Even our families will have nowhere to go. If the sect leader is tired of the mortal world and is no longer willing to manage the affairs of the sect, then please allow me to beg you. You can abdicate the position of sect leader and withdraw with peace of mind. This way, we can still create glory under the leadership of the new sect leader." Hearing this deacon's suggestion, the deacons and elders with heavy hearts immediately brightened and became spirited. Everyone weighed the pros and cons and agreed, asking Shui Lin to abdicate the position of sect leader and keep the Blood Blade sect. These elders and deacons were all very smart. Although the Blood Blade sect was disbanded, they could receive astronomical compensation and rewards. However, if the Blood Blade sect was kept, they could enjoy power and status and obtain countless wealth and resources in the future. Furthermore, as one of the 5 major sects, the Blood Blade sect's descendants would be protected for 10,000 years. Because of this, everyone took the risk of angering Shui Lin and persuaded her to abdicate the position of sect leader. In a short while, all the deacons, elders and guardians bowed and begged Shui Lin to abdicate the position. Only the blood illusion god and gold left emissary stood quietly beside Shui Lin and did not say anything. Furthermore, everyone was well aware of the situation. If Shui Lin abdicated the position of sect leader, the two of them had the highest chance of succeeding. Shui Lin looked at everyone calmly and shook her head gently. She said sincerely, "I have my own reasons for disbanding the Blood Blade sect, but there are also more important considerations. It is indeed worth celebrating that we have destroyed the Blood Sword sect. However, we have also suffered heavy losses and will only be able to recover after 10 years. Furthermore, there are two powerful mountains behind the Blood Sword sect. They are not people we can offend. They will definitely try to disband the sect while it is weak. Everyone present today was their target to be killed. Is glory and wealth more important, or the lives of our disciples and brothers more important? After saying this, she looked at everyone with a dignified gaze and observed their reactions. Many of the elders and deacons were astonished. Everyone looked at each other and started to discuss secretly. After all, they did not know the background of the Blood Sword sect, nor did they know who was behind the Blood Sword sect. Now that the sect leader had said it, she had already considered it. How could they not be worried? After hesitating for a while, many elders and deacons gave up on persuading her. Although there were still a few people who were unwilling, the situation was already decided. The Blood Blade sect was bound to be disbanded. Gold Left Emissary stood out and persuaded everyone, in 3 days the sect leader will retire. Everyone, take the treasures and wealth you deserve and leave the Blood Flame Divine Kingdom as soon as possible. You can either go to a foreign country and establish your own sect, or you can live in seclusion and cultivate the Divine Tao. In short, like the sect leader, I hope that everyone can live the rest of their lives peacefully. After another hour's delay, the group of elders, deacons, and reverends finally left with complicated feelings. In the next 2 days, Gold Left Emissary and Blood Dragon Right Emissary followed Shui Lin's instructions and took charge of the disbanding matters. Batch after batch of disciples, deacons, and elders of the Blood Blade sect left the Blood Blade sect with great wealth and treasures. 3 days later, everyone in the Blood Blade sect's headquarters was dismissed. Next, only the assets and wealth of the various branches were left to be handed over and distributed. Gold Left Emissary and Blood Dragon Right Emissary took care of those trivial matters. Shui Lin took Blood Illusion Godlord and quietly left the headquarters for the imperial capital. Mobile version update website. Chapter 2993. Originally, a top force like the Bloody Blade sect had many properties and complicated personnel. Even if she wanted to disband the sect, disband the various branches and 10,000 people, it would take a long time. But Lin Shui was already prepared and had a corresponding plan. As long as she successfully killed Lin Shan and took her revenge, she could immediately disband the Bloody Blade sect. More importantly, she did not need to do it herself. Left Emissary Jean and Right Emissary Blood Dragon would do it. When she left the Bloody Blade sect, only Sir God Blood Illusion followed her. The two of them used the transportation formation and crossed 3 counties, successfully entering the Bloody Flame County. This was the largest and most prosperous county in the Holy Kingdom, because the county was the capital of the Holy Kingdom. After entering the Bloody Flame County, Lin Shui and Sir God Blood Illusion could not use the transportation formation to travel. The two of them could only drive the god ship and speed in the sky. The journey was long. Even with the speed of the god ship, it would take 2 days to reach the capital. Along the way, Sir God Blood Illusion asked Lin Shui about his doubts. Sect Master, the Bloody Blade sect was founded by you and developed for almost 1,000 years. It is also the product of your hard work. Disbanding and giving up like this, won't you have any regrets? Lin Shui answered calmly, there's nothing to regret. I'm tired of scheming and cheating. Being bound by the sect, I have no freedom and no chance to reach higher realms of the divine path. Even if it develops for another 2,000 or 3,000 years, it will only expand the Bloody Blade sect's influence by 2 or 3 times. By then, the Bloody Blade sect will at most become the second sect. If I concentrate on cultivating and reach the Divine King realm, after 2,000 or 3,000 years, even if I can't reach the Divine King realm, I will definitely be a peak Divine Emperor. Hearing this, Sir God Blood Illusion nodded in agreement. That's right. Instead of slowly strengthening the sect, it's better to focus on improving oneself. If I can reach the Divine King realm and become a supreme expert, I can crush countless holy kingdoms alone. No matter how strong the sect or holy kingdom is, it is nothing in front of a Divine King expert. After a pause, he asked again, Sect Master, since you have already disbanded the sect and are preparing to concentrate on cultivating the divine path, why are you still heading to the capital? You know that in the next 2 or 3 months, there will be major events happening in the capital. It won't be peaceful. Sir God Blood Illusion did not say it, but both of them knew it. In a few days, the divine blood ceremony would begin. When the time came, prodigies from all over would gather in the capital city. Countless powerhouses and forces would flock there. The royal city would be very lively, but also very dangerous. Godlord Blood Illusion believed that after Wang Lin disbanded the Crimson Blade sect, she would very likely return to the Celestial Fey Empire and live in seclusion. He would always accompany Wang Lin, be her attendant and guard, protect and take care of her forever. But he did not understand why Wang Lin would go to King City. Wang Lin looked in the direction of the Imperial City and smiled. She said in a playful tone, My trip to the Imperial City has nothing to do with the divine blood ceremony. That's a feast for young geniuses. It has nothing to do with me. Moreover, the news of the destruction of the Blood Sword sect and the disbanding of the Blood Sword sect should have spread to the capital and reached the ears of all the major forces. Now that we've entered the capital, we're indeed in a perilous situation. But I had to go. After all, the consequences of eliminating the Blood Sword sect had yet to be revealed. We have to face it personally. We can't let him suffer for us. Sir God Blood Illusion was stunned and said with a strange tone, Him? Are you talking about young Master Tianxing? Wang Lin nodded slightly. Sir God Blood Illusion frowned and said, No wonder he quietly left the battlefield after defeating Lin Shan. So he went to the Imperial City. I've never understood why he didn't stay behind to celebrate the destruction of the Blood Sword sect when he deserved the greatest merit. With your personality, you would have given him an incomparably generous gift of thanks. Could it be that young Master Tianxing is indifferent to fame and fortune and doesn't care about resources and wealth? But if that's the case, why did he go to the Imperial City? Could it be that he wants to participate in the divine blood ceremony? Wang Lin shook her head and said calmly, It's not that he's indifferent to fame and fortune, nor is it that he looks down on my gift of thanks. It's because he's already guessed my next plan. His vision is even further than ours. How so? Sir God Blood Illusion was even more puzzled. Wang Lin patiently explained, If I had given him a gift of thanks, I would have given him at least several billion godstones or resources. Reality has proven that these resources are not that important to him. He only needs to use a little trick to easily obtain them. But those several billion godstones are an enormous fortune to the disciples of the Blood Sword sect. He would rather not give me a gift of thanks and fulfill my plan so that I can smoothly disband the Blood Sword sect. This is the first reason. The second reason is that he already knew that the Blood Sword sect had the support of a prince and that it involved the number 1 sect, the Heavenly Unity sect. Regardless of the reason, the Blood Sword sect was able to latch onto the Heavenly Unity sect. If we destroy the Blood Sword sect, that prince and the Heavenly Unity sect will take revenge on us. Chapter 2994. Godly Lord Blood Illusion had followed Lin Shui for nearly 1,000 years. He was the first friend Lin Shui made after entering the Great Yan Empire. He was also her most loyal supporter. But until now, he still could not see through Lin Shui sometimes. With her experience, strength, and age, she should be a high and mighty demoness who killed decisively. Most of the time, she behaved as such. But for some reason, she would occasionally reveal some characteristics that did not match her age. For example, naivety, arrogance, and unruly. To Godly Lord Blood Illusion, it was more difficult than breaking through to the Godly Monarch realm to completely understand Lin Shui's thoughts. But today, his horizons had been broadened. Lin Shui and Ji Tianxing had only met once, but they understood each other so well. It was as though they were telepathic. Godly Lord Blood Illusion could not help but mutter. Could they have been friends for a long time? Or was there a special fate between the two of them? After a moment of silence, he cleared these unrealistic thoughts from his mind. He continued asking, Sect Master, Lin Shan's godhead is already in your hands. Don't you hate him the most? Why haven't you dealt with him yet? Why you still putting him aside? At the mention of Lin Shan, Lin Shui's eyes immediately turned cold and sharp. She sneered and said in a sinister tone, "That bastard is the person I hate the most in my life. How can I deal with him so carelessly? If I don't bring him back to the celestial Fey Empire and deal with him in front of my father's grave, how can I resolve the hatred in my heart? How can I comfort my father's soul in heaven?" Godly Lord Blood Illusion was silent. He nodded and did not say anything else. At the same time, Blood Flame County, in another direction, Ji Tianxing was sitting on the back of a black dragon as he flew towards the imperial city. Since he left the Dragon Blood Forbidden Ground, he had been traveling for nearly 10 days and crossed 2 counties. He estimated that he would reach the imperial city in about 4 days. And the divine blood ceremony would be held in 6 days. He could still make it. It was worth mentioning that he had been attacked 3 times in the past few days. The first attack was when he left the border of Shanyang County. 9 middle-level godly lords led more than 100 heaven god experts and attacked him ferociously. The 2 sides fought fiercely for half an hour before Ji Tianxing killed them all. The results were remarkable. Not only had he obtained a large number of quintessence fragments, but he had also obtained several billion worth of resources and treasures. However, he was unable to find any identification on those people. Even so, Ji Tianxing didn't need to investigate to guess. Those people should be the remnants of the Blood Sword sect. The headquarters of the Blood Sword sect had been destroyed, and 80% of the elites and experts had been killed. However, the Blood Sword sect's sphere of influence was extremely vast. He had many branches under his command, as well as many consecrators and divine lord experts roaming the divine kingdoms. It was understandable that those remnants would ambush him in anger when they found out that the Dragon Blood Forbidden Land had been destroyed. Ji Tianxing was already mentally prepared, so he wasn't surprised at all. 4 days ago, he was attacked a second time in Guoyu County. There were only 4 Sir Gods who had attacked him. 3 middle-level God Monarchs and 1 7th-level God Monarch. The 4 Sir Gods had different styles and came from different clans. The divine abilities and consummate skills that they were good at were also rarely seen. In fact, these 4 Sir Gods might not even be citizens of the Blood Flame Divine Kingdom. Ji Tianxing guessed that they were most likely consecrators or hired thugs of some faction or noble. After a fierce battle, he successfully killed the 3 middle-level God Monarchs. As for the High God Monarch, he had a spatial divine artifact. After being heavily injured by Ji Tianxing, he saw that the situation was bad and fled. Yesterday morning, Ji Tianxing had just entered the Blood Flame County. When he passed by a certain mountain range, he was attacked for the 3rd time. The people who attacked him this time were even more strange. 3 Sir Gods appeared at the same time. The leader was an ugly silver-haired old man with a sinister face. He had the strength of a 6th-level God Monarch. After the 2 sides exchanged several blows, the silver-haired old man and the 2 Sir Gods were injured. They actually stopped attacking and threatened Ji Tianxing not to enter the capital, or else they would lose their lives. After leaving behind a few harsh words, the 3 Sir Gods were about to leave. However, Ji Tianxing was even more ruthless. Without hesitation, he used the Heaven Sealing Sword formation and stopped the 3 Sir Gods. After a fierce battle, the 3 Sir Gods were killed by Ji Tianxing. Their godheads were also shattered. Next, he let the Black Dragon continue on his way. After entering the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower, he refined the godhead fragments of the 3 Sir Gods in the distorted spacetime. He gained 10 new laws and his strength increased. These were secondary. The most important thing was that Ji Tianxing discovered that these 3 Sir Gods were actually from the Fiend Blood Palace. The 3 of them were Purple Star Assassins. The silver-haired old man was the strongest and ranked very high. Previously, when Ji Tianxing was still in the Ning residence in the heavenly Snow County City, Duanlu Xiong had spent 10 billion divine stones to hire 2 Purple Star Assassins from the Fiend Blood Palace to ambush Ji Tianxing in the Maplewoods Manor. The two purple star assassins were called Thousand Star Extermination and Thousand Star Kill. At that time, Ji Tianxing killed Thousand Star Kill but spared Thousand Star Extermination. Thousand Star Extermination was severely poisoned and fled back to the Fiend Blood Palace with serious injuries. At that time, Ji Tianxing asked Thousand Star Extermination to pass a message to the Fiend Blood Palace that they should not provoke him in the future. He did not expect that the Fiend Blood Palace would send 3 purple star assassins to deal with him in less than a month. Of course, the mission of these 3 purple star assassins was not to kill Ji Tianxing. They were only there to warn Ji Tianxing and pass a message to him. However, they did not expect that Ji Tianxing would fulfill his promise and kill them directly. It could be said that he had died a very sullen death. The Fiend Blood Palace should be a force under the second prince. At that time, I let Thousand Star Extermination go and asked him to pass a message to the Fiend Blood Palace. I thought that the Fiend Blood Palace would retreat and not dare to deal with me again. Now, the Fiend Blood Palace obviously did not take my words seriously. Could it be that the second prince also wants to get involved in this mess and kill me? The enmity between Ji Tianxing and the second prince began because of the Qingshan city governor. The 50,000 sets of divine realm equipment were prepared for the second prince, but Jian Wushuang intercepted them. Later, it involved Princess Tianfeng, one of the second prince's confidants, who was also killed by Ji Tianxing. Thinking of these things, Ji Tianxing was already mentally prepared. When I enter the royal city this time, not only will I have to bear the revenge of the little prince, but I will also be targeted by the second prince. Even the people of the He Tian sect are likely to attack me. The royal city must be very lively, right? Ji Tianxing sat on Black Dragon's back, looking at the southern sky and muttering to himself. At this time, White Dragon, who was standing behind him, asked, "Master, Black Dragon has been on the road these days. You have been cultivating in seclusion in the Divine Tower for a long time. You have refined the Godhead fragments of those divine emperors. How many laws have you mastered? Are you about to break through the 4th stage and become a middle-level divine emperor?" When Ji Tianxing was in seclusion in the Divine Tower, White Dragon guarded the Divine Tower while Black Dragon carried him on the road. Ji Tianxing came out of seclusion an hour ago. Hearing White Dragon's question, Ji Tianxing said with a smile, "I have refined the Godhead fragments of 3 batches of divine emperors. The number of laws I have mastered has reached 190, which is comparable to that of a divine emperor in the 9th stage. As for the 4th stage, I won't be able to reach it in a short time." Chapter 2995. Ji Tianxing's answer made by Long feel a little regretful. Although Master has mastered as many as 190 laws, I reckon that in the entire Bloodfire Divine Kingdom, there is no second person who is as strong as you. But after all, you are still a lower Divine Lord and have not broken through to the middle Divine Lord. Entering the Imperial City this time, you will face the Divine Kingdom's top experts. Moreover, the various forces are likely to join forces to deal with you. If you can break through to the 4th stage, we will have nothing to worry about. Bai Long sighed with some regret and muttered softly, "If not, you don't have to be protective of the fairer sex. If you can keep that blood saber, our chances of winning will be much higher." Ji Tianxing glanced at him and asked with a faint smile, "Do you think that I returned the blood saber to Wang Lin because I am protective of the fairer sex?" Cough cough. Bai Long coughed twice to hide his embarrassment and said with a smile, "No, Master, that is called the demeanor of a powerhouse. You don't want to take advantage of others." Ji Tianxing rolled his eyes at him. "I'm too lazy to talk to you. Let Burial of Heaven explain." Burial of Heaven's deep and powerful voice immediately sounded in Bai Long's mind. Wang Lin's blood saber was originally a monarch-grade artifact of the demon clan. It was transformed from the sharp teeth of the ancient demon king. After 10,000 years of killing and blood infiltration, the demon saber has long turned into a killing blade. The blood aura is too strong. Even Wang Lin was infected by the blood saber's killing aura and her soul became chaotic. As a result, her personality was erratic and unpredictable. Moreover, that blood saber is destined to not become a monarch-grade artifact. If I refine it and completely integrate it, it will affect my quality and power. In the future, it will be even more difficult to restore it to a monarch-grade artifact. After listening to Burial of Heaven's explanation, Bai Long suddenly understood and nodded. You mean that the blood saber has caused Wang Lin to have a split personality? The blood saber's material and power are special. It is destined to not become a monarch-grade artifact, so you don't like it? Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, You can say that. Bai Long hurriedly looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, Master, is that witch really suffering from schizophrenia? Ji Tianxing nodded and said calmly, Yes, but it's not too serious at the moment. Then why did you return the blood knife to her? Her condition will definitely get worse in the future, White Dragon asked, puzzled. Ji Tianxing frowned and said, The Burial of Heaven can't devour the blood saber, so why would I keep the blood saber? Of course he had to return it to her. The matter with the blood sword sect wasn't over yet. If she lost her blood saber, how could she protect herself from so many experts? As for whether or not her schizophrenia will worsen in the future, what does that have to do with me? Bai Long rubbed his chin and said with a playful smile, Master, according to this disciple's understanding, you are not such a heartless person. That demoness is obviously interested in you. Don't you plan to help her? Ji Tianxing looked at him expressionlessly. And then? Bai Long smiled and said in an even more strange tone, And then, if you do her a favor again, she will definitely be unable to resist and repay you with her body. As long as the red flag at home doesn't fall, the colorful flag outside flutters, Ji Tianxing frowned and narrowed his eyes. The corner of his mouth hooked into a cold smile and was about to make things difficult for him. At this time, a cold and disdainful voice suddenly sounded. The cold voice came from Chen Yu, full of disdain and disdain. Ji Tianxing's brows relaxed and he looked at Bai Long with a playful smile. Did you hear that? Bai Long didn't dare to talk back to his master. He angrily scolded Chen Yu, You little fox. Instead of cultivating in seclusion, you eavesdrop on our master and disciple conversation. You disappoint me. Chen Yu's voice was still cold and full of disdain. You like being a scum, so don't lead old Ji astray. Besides, why are you so disappointed all the time? Hey, you stinking fox. Bai Long rolled up his sleeves and went into the divine pagoda to argue with Chen Yu. Ji Tianxing dismissed it with a smile, no longer paying attention to their quarrel, and continued to meditate. Time passed quickly. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, soon 4 days had passed. On the morning of the 5th day, Ji Tianxing finally arrived at the imperial city. When he was still 1,000 miles away from the imperial city, he put away the black dragon and traveled alone. He sped across the sky and looked at the imperial city 1,000 miles away. The weather was clear and the sun rose from the east. Under the golden sun, the imperial city exuded an ancient and majestic aura. It was an ancient and majestic city with 10,000 years of history, located in the Changfeng mountain range. The Changfeng mountain range ran from north to south and stretched for nearly 10 million miles. It was one of the best divine ranges in the divine nation. The imperial city was located in the most majestic area of the mountain range. It was also the area with the most divine power. This majestic city was located on a towering mountain range of 10,000 miles. The mountain was like an ancient divine dragon lying on the ground. The majestic city was like a dragon on its back, commanding the wind and rain as it looked down on all living beings. It was different from other prefectural cities, which were all square in shape. This majestic city was built along the mountain ridge in the shape of a long strip. Its width was between 50 to 100 miles, but its length was more than 500 miles. Such a majestic city was large enough to accommodate 8 million people and deities. The ancient city walls were hundreds of feet tall and glowed with a black and red luster. One could clearly see the mottled traces of time. There were many tall buildings and palaces in the city. Countless residences and buildings were arranged in picturesque disorder. Under the morning sun, the glazed and golden tiles of the palaces reflected dazzling light. Ji Tianxing released his divine sense to investigate and saw that in the sky around him, there were many gods and powerhouses flying toward the imperial city like him. These gods and experts came from all over the divine nation. They were of different races and attire. There were the Blood Flame God race, the Raging Flame God race, the Crimson Blood God race, the Three-Eyed God race, the Indigo God race, the Heavenly Jade race, and other races. Most of the experts rode on mighty divine beasts or sat in luxurious carriages pulled by rare and exotic beasts. A small number of experts and commoners rode on divine ships or walked on air. Ji Tianxing knew that the flow of people in the imperial city was usually very large. The divine blood ceremony was about to begin. Countless gods would come to watch the ceremony. Thus, the number of people entering and leaving the imperial city was several times greater than usual. He had originally been considering whether he should disguise himself before entering the imperial city. But on second thought, he realized that only a few experts and sects knew his identity and background. The vast majority of people did not recognize him. Even if they passed by him, they would not give him a second glance. Even if he disguised himself, he would not be able to fool those who wanted to find him. Thus, there was no need to disguise himself. Thus, he openly landed outside the northern city gate and waited in line to enter the city. As soon as the 1,000-foot-tall city gate opened, a line of 100 people had already formed in front of it. Many gods and experts obediently took out their identity cards and waited in line to enter the city. No matter where the experts came from, they did not dare to cause trouble in front of the imperial guards. Ji Tianxing had only been in line for a short while when 4 silver-armored imperial guards suddenly walked out of the city gate and stopped him. Chapter 2996. There were more than 100 silver-armored imperial guards at the city gate. They had an iron-blooded aura as they stared at everyone who entered the city. The moment Ji Tianxing appeared, the captain of the imperial guards stared at him. After observing him carefully and confirming that it was him, the captain personally led 3 imperial guards to stop him. "You are Tianxing?" The captain of the imperial guards, who was burly and had a full beard, stared at Ji Tianxing with his red eyes and asked expressionlessly. The 3 imperial guards spread out and surrounded Ji Tianxing. It was obvious that they did not come with good intentions. It was as if they were trying to catch a fugitive. The surrounding citizens and experts immediately took a few steps back to avoid being implicated. At the same time, everyone looked at Ji Tianxing with vigilance and curiosity. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, "That's me." The captain of the imperial guards nodded slightly and said in a dignified tone, "Please come with us." Ji Tianxing gave him a deep look, but he didn't refuse or resist. He only nodded. Then, he followed behind the captain of the imperial guards and was surrounded by 3 other imperial guards. They crossed the city gate and entered the imperial city. The surrounding citizens who were watching the show were curious and gloating. They started to whisper and discuss. "Who is that kid? Why is he being targeted by the imperial guards? It seems that he is a fugitive from the imperial city? Very likely. Every year, there will be a few foolish fugitives who think that they can fool others and try to sneak into the imperial city. In the end, they are all seen through by the imperial guards. He is being taken away by the imperial guards. That kid is in trouble." However, a few Sir God experts in the crowd frowned and pondered. Their expressions were complicated. Their strength and status were higher. Of course, they would not be as superficial as the ordinary citizens. Just now, they all heard the captain of the Imperial Guard say, "Please." On the surface, the captain of the Imperial Guard's attitude was cold and dignified. But in reality, he was not disrespectful or offensive to Ji Tianxing. Moreover, they only took Ji Tianxing away. They did not escort or tie him up. If they really wanted to catch a fugitive, how could they be so gentle? When the divine lords noticed this, they could not help but be curious and speculate. Who was Tianxing? Suddenly, one of the divine monarchs thought of something that happened recently. Friends, please prompt. Pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading. She and Legend's expressions changed dramatically, and they exclaimed, "Is it him? How is this possible?" His exclamation attracted the attention of the people around him. Many commoners and a few divine lords looked at him and began asking questions. "Senior, who was that kid just now? Brother, do you know that white-robe brat? That kid is from a foreign race. Did he do something wrong?" The divine lord powerhouse remained silent, his expression solemn and indifferent. When everyone asked too many questions, he really couldn't stand the disturbance and endured it. He couldn't help but scold, "Stop trying to get to the bottom of this matter. That young master's identity isn't something that we can investigate." Seeing this divine lord's solemn expression and solemn tone, the crowd realized the seriousness of the matter and did not dare to pester him any further. The captain of the Imperial Guards and 3 other Imperial Guards led Ji Tianxing into the royal city. They walked along the wide bluestone road for 1,000 feet and turned into a secluded alley. Then, the captain of the Imperial Guards asked the 3 Imperial Guards to leave and faced Ji Tianxing alone. He cupped his hands at Ji Tianxing and said respectfully, "Young Master Tianxing, there were too many people at the city gate just now. I had no choice but to offend you. Please forgive me." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly. His expression was calm as he said, "Let's get down to business. Who wants to see me?" The captain of the Imperial Guards looked around and saw that there was no one following them within 1,000 feet. Then he replied cautiously, "My master invites you to meet him. He has something important to tell you. Lead the way." Ji Tianxing vaguely guessed something and agreed. The captain of the Imperial Guards did not waste any more time. He quickly took out a monarch-level divine talisman and poured his divine power into it. Swoosh! The golden divine talisman ignited and burst out with dazzling white light, engulfing him and Ji Tianxing. The space distorted, and the 2 figures disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, Ji Tianxing and the captain of the Imperial Guards teleported hundreds of miles away and appeared in a manor in the northern part of the city. This manor occupied an area of 10,000 feet in radius. It was built beautifully and exceptionally luxuriously. There were rows upon rows of palaces and residences in the surroundings, but the environment was very quiet and peaceful, and the divine power was extremely abundant. It was easy to imagine that such a luxurious residence in the royal city would definitely be expensive. Most likely, only the major powers and nobles would be able to possess them. The captain of the Imperial Guards led Ji Tianxing through the garden and corridors to the rockery beside the lake. And friends, please prompt. Pay attention to the rest of your eyes after reading for a long time. 00 recommended reading. NBSP. He cast a spell to dispel the illusory formation and opened a secret door. Only then did he enter the dark tunnel. Following the winding passageway, the 2 of them arrived at the door of a secret room at the bottom of the lake. The captain of the Imperial Guards bowed towards the door and respectfully said, "Master, young Master Tianxing is here." From the pitch-black door of the secret room, a dignified male voice came, "Invite him in." The captain of the Imperial Guards responded and cast a spell to dispel the formation, opening the door of the secret room. Then he stood guard at the door of the secret room and gestured for Ji Tianxing to enter. Ji Tianxing stepped through the stone door and entered the dark secret room. Bang! The heavy stone door closed. The secret room with a radius of 100 feet was very quiet. The floor and walls were engraved with divine formations, and the 5-colored divine power condensed into threads and clouds, illusory and blurred. Ji Tianxing looked around and saw a purple jade stone table and 2 white jade chairs in the middle of the secret room. A middle-aged man wearing a golden dragon robe and a golden crown was sitting on the white jade chair. In front of him was an exquisite teapot and 2 exquisite teacups. "Young Master Tianxing, please sit." The golden-robed man stood up and greeted, looking at Ji Tianxing with a smile. This person was well-built and had a dignified appearance. His brows were filled with righteousness, but he did not pretend to be dignified. He had a natural affinity. Ji Tianxing walked to the table and cupped his hands. "Greetings, Third Prince." Clearly, The golden-robed man was Ning Qinggong's brother-in-law, the third son of the current king, Duanmu Yannian. The third prince saw that Ji Tianxing was neither servile nor overbearing and was still unfathomable. He could not help but sigh. For half a year, this little prince has only heard of young master's various deeds and has already felt admiration. Now that I have seen young master in person, I am even more amazed. You are truly extraordinary. Third prince is too kind, Ji Tianxing said politely. The third prince extended his hand and said, "Come, sit down and drink some tea." He made a please gesture with his left hand and held the teapot in his right as he personally poured tea for Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing nodded and sat down, taking a sip of tea. I have just arrived at the capital, and the third prince is meeting with me in secret. Could something big have happened? The third prince nodded slightly, and the smile on his face disappeared. He said with a heavy expression, "Yes, something big has happened. After the divine blood ceremony, the king will appoint a crown prince." Chapter 2997. Ji Tianxing's temperament was relatively straightforward. After meeting with the third prince, he did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. Unexpectedly, the third prince was even more straightforward than him and directly threw out a heavy bomb. Even though Ji Tianxing's state of mind was as steady as Mount Tai and his state of mind was as still as an ancient well, he could not help but frown. "This is too sudden." Ji Tianxing frowned and said in a dignified tone, "All these years, the three princes have been secretly competing for the throne. This is also known by the high-level forces and powerhouses. Everyone understands the monarch's attitude. He wants to observe for a few more years to see the talents and characters of the three princes before making a decision. But why did the monarch suddenly announce the result? Appointing the crown prince is equivalent to announcing the monarch's decision. As long as the monarch is alive and the kingdom of God is not in chaos, the crown prince will be the crown prince. After the monarch abdicates, the crown prince will automatically succeed the throne. There are no twists and turns or accidents to speak of." The third prince picked up the teacup and took a deep sip. He gently shook his head and said, "Logically speaking, father is in his prime and the kingdom of God is very stable. There is no need for him to be so anxious and there is no reason for him to make this decision." Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement and said slowly, "Unless the monarch is under some kind of threat or is under some kind of pressure." The third prince frowned and thought for a while, then shook his head and said, "This does not make sense." Ji Tianxing asked, "Then do you know who the monarch is going to appoint as the crown prince?" The third prince stared at him and said, "I have always heard that young master has excellent strategy and great foresight. Please make a guess." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "Since the third prince said so, the answer is basically confirmed. First of all, the monarch's choice is definitely not you. Otherwise, you would not be so anxious. Instead, you should be thinking about how to stabilize the position of the crown prince and suppress the other two princes." The third prince nodded and looked at him with shining eyes, indicating for him to continue. Ji Tianxing raised two fingers and continued, "Second of all, the monarch's choice is not the second prince. Because the second prince has always advocated for the crown prince and is the most popular among the people. He has the most power and background. If he were to become the crown prince, it would be an expected outcome. But you fought with him for many years, so you must have a lot of information on him. You have a good chance of winning." Hearing this, the third prince narrowed his eyes, a look of deep shock flashing through his eyes. The fact that Ji Tianxing was able to pick out the second prince had already surprised him. He did not expect Ji Tianxing to be able to guess the trump card in his hand and the way to deal with it. This made everyone have a whole new level of respect for him. Ji Tianxing withdrew his finger and said with a smile, "So, it goes without saying who will be the crown prince." Perhaps no one would have thought that the crown prince that the monarch was going to appoint would be the most low-key and inconspicuous little prince. It was precisely because he was the youngest that he acted the most low-key. He had never revealed his ambition, nor did he have a powerful background. Therefore, you and the second prince both ignored him and did not treat him as a competitor. On the contrary, all of you even tried to win him over and rope him in, wanting him to become your helper. But in the end, the two of you who had the most hope became the losers. He didn't seem to be a threat, but he was the biggest winner. So much so that when you heard the answer, you felt that it was both absurd and terrifying. Moreover, you only just realized that you did not understand him well enough. Even if you wanted to deal with him, you didn't know where to start. Ji Tianxing's tone was solemn as he spoke frankly with assurance. Hearing this, the third prince's blood boiled, his eyes flashing. When Ji Tianxing finished speaking, he actually stood up and couldn't help but applaud and praise. Good. That's great. The third prince was excited, not concealing the excitement in his heart and his admiration for Ji Tianxing. Young master is indeed a great talent. Your analysis is thorough, meticulous, and accurate. He was very clear that it had not even been a year since Ji Tianxing had appeared in Qingshan City. In such a short time, Ji Tianxing had risen step by step and finally arrived at the capital. The third prince knew that he was powerful and ruthless. The destruction of the Blood Sword sect was the best proof. But he did not expect that Ji Tianxing had never come into contact with princes, royalty, or power. Yet, he was able to point out the pros and cons in a single sentence, as well as the hidden key points. It was as if he had seen everything with his own eyes and understood everything. The third prince was extremely shocked and impressed by such terrifying analytical and reasoning abilities. He even suspected that this young Master Tianxing was really a young genius and not an old monster that had lived for tens of thousands of years. After a long while, the third prince gradually calmed down. He stared at Ji Tianxing, cupped his hands, and solemnly said, "It is this humble prince's honor to be acquainted with such a great talent as young Master Tianxing. Now that the great calamity is imminent, although this humble prince has made all sorts of preparations and methods, I still do not feel confident. I hope that young master can lend a helping hand and help this humble prince reverse the situation and stabilize the situation." The third prince was so impressed by Ji Tianxing's intelligence that he solemnly asked for his help. If others were to see this scene, they would probably be dumbstruck. To have a respected prince treat a wise man with respect and sincerely ask for help was the lifelong dream of every strategist in the world. However, Ji Tianxing shook his head and refused. "Third prince is too serious. This lord is just a country bumpkin. How could I have the ability and methods to reverse the situation?" The third prince thought he was being modest, so he bowed again and said sincerely, "Young master's talent and learning are obvious to all the princes and great sections. This humble prince sincerely invites young master to assist me and is willing to make you the chief of staff. In the future, if the situation is reversed and this humble prince is able to inherit the throne, you will definitely be made prime minister. This is this humble prince's promise to you." The third prince's words were powerful and sonorous. If it were any other divine monarch, they definitely would not be able to resist this temptation, let alone refuse the third prince's sincerity. However, Ji Tianxing still shook his head and said with a chuckle, "Third prince misunderstands. This lord is just a passerby who yearns for unfettered freedom and will not be reluctant to part with the mortal world. As for your country's struggle for the throne, in the end, it has nothing to do with this lord. No matter who becomes the crown prince and who inherits the throne, it is the Duanmu family's business." Since Ji Tianxing had already made it so clear, the third prince naturally knew that his mind was set and that it would be very difficult to change it. However, the third prince was still very unwilling. He frowned and thought for a moment, then said sincerely, "Young Master Tianxing, this king has also heard Patriarch Ning say that you have a free and easy personality and yearn for freedom. Now that you have refused this king's invitation, it is within expectations. However, you must know that you and second royal brother have already formed a deep enmity that is very difficult to resolve. The Blood Sword sect is also the fifth prince's arm, but it was also destroyed by you. Second prince and fifth prince are like fire and water with you. If they succeed in ascending the throne, they will definitely use all of Divine Nation's power to deal with you. At that time, even if this king shares a common enemy with you and wants to help you resist the storm, I will not be able to do so. Chapter 2998. The third prince tried to persuade Ji Tianxing with emotion and reason. Not only did he play the emotional card, but he also explained the pros and cons and deduced the future situation. If it was anyone else, they would not reject him. However, Ji Tianxing had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. He was not afraid of how unreasonable, domineering, or cruel the opponent was. He could always fight back in an even more domineering manner. He was only afraid of sincere invitations, pleas, and crying complaints. This made it difficult for him to refuse. In the end, the third prince said everything he needed to say. He even said that he had a young, beautiful, and intelligent daughter. She was only 18 years old this year, and her name was Princess Yin. Princess Silverbell was the apple of their eye and the brightest pearl of the royal family. Ordinary young talents were definitely not worthy of their daughter. Only a peerless genius like Ji Tianxing was qualified to marry Princess Yin. Tianxing felt his scalp tingle. He was afraid that the third prince would be his father-in-law if he continued to speak. If that was the case, then when he saw Ning Xiyuan again, wouldn't he have to call her cousin? It was so awkward no matter how he thought about it. In the end, Ji Tianxing could not refuse the third prince's kindness. He could only interrupt and say, "Third prince, thank you for thinking so highly of me and trusting me. Unfortunately, I won't be staying in the divine kingdom for long, and I can't help you ascend to the throne. However, although I can't be your aide, we can be friends. We can help each other, fight the enemy together, and help you plan." Hearing this, the third prince felt much better. Although it was very regretful that Ji Tianxing could not be used by him and become a general under his command. He knew very well that a genius like Ji Tianxing might not be someone he could control. It was already a good result for them to be friends, watch out for each other, and help each other. Therefore, the third prince cupped his hands and bowed to Ji Tianxing, sincerely thanking him. Ji Tianxing hurriedly returned the bow. The two of them exchanged a few pleasantries before sitting down to chat. Without talking about government affairs or important matters, the atmosphere became much more relaxed. The third prince took the initiative to ask, "If this king is not wrong, young master, you came to the capital this time for the divine blood ceremony, right?" "That's right." Ji Tianxing did not hide it. The third prince smiled faintly and said, "With young master's strength, winning the championship in the martial arts competition is already a foregone conclusion. However, the rules of the martial arts competition were complicated. They had to be selected layer by layer, and it would take a long time. This king will arrange for you to enter the top 20 and participate in the last few rounds of the competition. This will save you a lot of trouble." This was a classic example of under-the-table manipulation. However, the third prince did not have any psychological burden. After all, Ji Tianxing's strength was too strong. He would definitely sweep away all his opponents. Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, "Thank you." The third prince continued, "This prince heard that after the blood sword sect was destroyed, fifth brother flew into a rage and smashed many things in the residence, even killing several attendants. Fifth brother had always been low-key and steady in his actions. He never showed his emotions on his face. In all these years, this is the first time I've seen him so angry. It's easy to imagine that before you even arrived at the capital, he was already plotting how to get rid of you." After a pause, he continued, "There's also second brother. Although you don't have any direct enmity with him, he's the princess of Skywind. However, Princess Tianfeng was his most trusted subordinate. She was also the most important chess piece in his network of forces in the north. In the end, you killed Princess Skywind and did not receive any punishment from the king. The position of Princess Skywind fell into the hands of an old noble of the neutral faction. This is a great loss to second brother. With second brother's vengeful personality, he most likely won't let you off." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "This king knows. Apart from the two princes, there are also other forces that want to get rid of me. Right now, the capital is like the mouth of a giant beast, ready to swallow me at any time. Seeing that he was so clear about the situation, the third prince took the opportunity to persuade him, "Since young master also understands your situation, then this king will be frank. I hope that young master can stay in this king's mansion temporarily. You can rest in peace and avoid unnecessary trouble." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "No need. This will inevitably bring more danger and trouble to the third marquis mansion." The third prince's eyes were somewhat dim. He thought to himself, "I'm afraid that's not the only reason. Most importantly, you don't want to get too close to this king, right?" Of course, he could only think about this in his heart. Everyone had a tacit understanding. If he said it out loud, it would be meaningless. But the third prince was still not satisfied. He continued, "Since young master feels that it's not convenient to stay in the third marquis mansion, then why don't you stay here? This long-wind courtyard is one of my mansions. It has all the necessary facilities. Maids, guards, and servants are also fully equipped. Your safety and comfort are guaranteed. Moreover, this long-wind courtyard is not far from my mansion. It's only 50 miles, so it's convenient to travel." Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. He thought of something and asked, "Right, is there any news about Miss Ning?" Calculating the time, she should have broken through to the Divine Lord realm and should be arriving at the capital soon, right? At the mention of Ning Xiyuan, the third prince immediately revealed a gratified smile. "Aya, this prince forgot about such an important matter. Before we meet, this king still wants to report the good news to young master." "That's right. As you expected, that girl Xiyuan successfully broke through to the Divine Lord realm 10 days ago. After recuperating at home for 7 days, she rushed to the capital. Calculating the time, she should be arriving tomorrow." The third prince stared at Ji Tianxing and said in a solemn tone, "Speaking of Xiyuan, before this king came to see you, the queen consort repeatedly urged me to thank you in person. Thank you for providing medicine and pill formulas to resolve the Ning family's bloodline, Heavenly Bane. From now on, the Ning family descendants will no longer be tortured by Heavenly Bane. Each of them will have a boundless future. Not only did you save the Ning family from calamity, but you also sent the Ning family from hell to heaven, giving the Ning family a chance to soar. To the Ning family, you are a great benefactor of immeasurable merit. The Ning family descendants will forever remember this in their hearts. The queen consort has often said that when you come to the capital, she will definitely hold a banquet to welcome you." Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded, his tone indifferent as he said, "It's just a small matter, not worth mentioning." He wasn't bragging, but it really wasn't difficult for him. The third prince was even more shocked. He laughed heartily and said, "A genius is a genius, indeed different from the rest. The heavenly bane that has troubled the Ning family for thousands of years is just a small matter to you. This is the difference between us. To say something presumptuous, this king sometimes fantasizes that this king can be as extraordinary as young master. Even if I have to give up the throne and the identity of a prince, I am willing to do so." Ji Tianxing only smiled slightly and didn't comment. However, the voice of the burial of heaven sounded in his mind and said disdainfully, "This guy really knows how to dream. A mere prince and monarch in exchange for the soul of a divine king? Ha! Even the great Yan Empire's emperor isn't fit to carry our shoes." Chapter 2999. A person's manner of speech and bearing depended on their status and knowledge. A noble figure like the third prince was naturally at the top of the Bloodfire Divine Kingdom. But in front of Ji Tianxing and the burial of heaven, he was still a frog at the bottom of the well. How could a divine lord who had never walked out of the great Yan Empire know the vastness of the Tianbei region, the vastness of the boundless heaven continent, and the vastness of the divine realm? Ji Tianxing definitely would not refute the third prince. That would be losing his bearing. The small talk was over. The third prince exhorted Ji Tianxing again before he took his leave. Of course, he left quietly. Ji Tianxing stayed in the long-wind court temporarily and left the secret room to enter the main hall. He used his divine sense to observe the entire house. Being vigilant in times of peace was his habit. Not only did he have to understand the layout of the Longwind court and the distribution of people, but he also had to understand the strength of the array defense. In a short moment, he observed clearly. The Longwind court with a radius of 10,000 feet was enough to accommodate a large family of several thousand people. But there were only 400 people living here. Among them, 300 were guards, and more than 100 were servants and maids. 2 monarch-grade high-grade great arrays enveloped the entire house. The guards were divided into 3 teams, patrolling in shifts, day and night. On the surface, the Longwind court's defensive power was not weak. It was difficult for ordinary people to sneak in. But Ji Tianxing was clear that this could not stop a high divine lord at all. He was about to personally take action and modify the 2 great arrays. At this time, a white-bearded old man in a purple robe and a square turban hat brought 4 experts into the main hall. Old man Lai Fu pays respect to young master. Subordinate pays respect to young master. The white-bearded old man took the lead to bow. The 4 young experts followed closely behind. Ji Tianxing raised his head and looked. Glancing at Lai Fu, he guessed his identity. 6th level Divine Lord Realm, a veteran middle Divine Lord. He should be the housekeeper of the Longwind court. As for the 4 young experts, there were 3 strong and tall young men and a tall and muscular red-haired woman. These 4 people's strengths were all around 3rd level Divine Lord Realm. They were the cream of the crop among low-rank Divine Lords. Ji Tianxing took his seat at the head of the table and said calmly, "Everyone, please dispense with the formalities. Lai Fu, please speak your mind." Lai Fu and the others thanked him before straightening their backs to speak. Reporting to young master, this old man is the housekeeper of Changfeng Courtyard, responsible for guarding the courtyard and managing the internal affairs. The Lord had already instructed that the young master would stay here for a while. This old man will do his best to take care of all the internal affairs and will not disturb young master. If young master has any requests, just let me know. Ji Tianxing nodded in satisfaction. Okay, continue. Lai Fu then pointed at the 4 young experts and introduced, "These 3 young Sir Gods are the captains of the 300 guards of the Eternal Wind Courtyard. They take turns to guard the courtyard and protect your safety. You can choose a few people to serve by your side. This is Sir Immortal Zhenhong, the leader of the maids in the residence. He is very suitable to protect you." When Lai Fu spoke, his expression was respectful and his tone was normal. There was nothing wrong with it. But his last sentence was a little thought-provoking. Ji Tianxing couldn't help but frown and look at the red-haired woman. This woman was from the Angry Blood God clan. She was about 3 meters tall and had a pretty face. Her skin was a healthy wheat color and her limbs were long and slender. Especially her legs, which took up 60% of her body. It was very exaggerated. Her body was neither fat nor thin. She was in a fit, well-proportioned, and sturdy state. It could be imagined that her explosive power, endurance, and toughness far exceeded that of an ordinary Sir God. If she entered a state of battle, she could turn into a female Tyrannosaurus. For most men, a woman with this kind of appearance and temperament had a special charm and temperament. But Ji Tianxing didn't care if the woman was beautiful or not. He didn't have any bad thoughts. While he was sizing up Sir Immortal Zhenhong, Sir Immortal Zhenhong also looked at him without any hesitation and seriously sized him up. She didn't show a shy look like a normal woman and bury her head in her majestic chest. It could be imagined that her personality and behavior were not shy and gentle. Most likely she was straightforward and fiery. Moreover, the 3 guard captains also stared at Ji Tianxing with a complicated look in their eyes. They were in awe but also vigilant and defensive. Ji Tianxing glanced at them and suddenly understood. "The 3 of you are pursuing Sir Immortal Zhenhong?" He raised his eyebrows and asked indifferently. It was just a casual question, but it pointed out the thoughts of the 3 guard captains and Sir Immortal Zhenhong. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Sir Immortal Zhenhong's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise and quickly lowered his head. The 3 captains were also embarrassed and quickly turned their heads to look elsewhere. Lai Fu was afraid that Ji Tianxing would be angry, So he quickly smoothed things over and explained with a smile, "Young master, please calm down. There is no such thing. It's just that the four of them came to the Longwind court and worked together for hundreds of years. They have a deep relationship and are like siblings. It's natural for them to care and take care of each other. But no matter what, you are His Majesty's guest and they are His Majesty's servants. As long as it's your order, we will unconditionally obey and will not go against your will. Moreover, this old man can guarantee with his life that Sir Immortal Xianxia is pure and has never had intimate interactions with any man. Even your history of romance is blank." Lai Fu's words were a bit explicit. Not only did he imply that Ji Tianxing could do whatever he wanted, but he also guaranteed that Sir Immortal Xianxia was original. The three guard captains immediately lowered their heads even more, hiding deep helplessness and pain in their eyes. Sir Immortal Xianxia's expression still did not change, but his eyes were cold and indifferent, without any emotional fluctuations. It was as if she was just a puppet. It was a posture of resignation. She suppressed all her will and absolutely obeyed orders. Ji Tianxing suddenly sneered and slapped Lai Fu's face from a distance. Slap. The crisp sound of the slap rang out. Lai Fu covered his cheek and fell to the ground, but he did not dare to get up. He hurriedly knelt down and apologized. Ji Tianxing coldly shouted, "You old dog, you are so good at currying favor and taking advantage of others. What kind of person do you think I am? What do you want to do? Pimp? Or is this a honey trap that the third prince asked you to carry out?" His voice was not loud, nor was it angry. But it contained a soul-stirring majesty, fiercely intimidating Lai Fu and the four Sir Immortals. The entire hall was shrouded in an invisible aura. Lai Fu knelt on the ground, trembling, kowtowing and begging for mercy. The three guard captains and Sir Immortal Xianxia also lowered their heads in fear, not daring to breathe. However, Ji Tianxing's reaction and attitude made the three guard captains secretly relieved, lowering their vigilance. Sir Immortal Xianxia was the same. His cold and indifferent eyes eased a lot. Seeing Lai Fu's frightened and pitiful appearance, she couldn't bear it. She hurriedly bowed and said to Ji Tianxing, "Please calm down, young Master Tianxing. Uncle Lai Fu did not dare to offend you, nor did he mean to blaspheme you. It was Sir Immortal Xianxia who failed to fulfill his duty as a guard captain. Sir Immortal Xianxia is willing to accompany young Master and ask for forgiveness with practical actions." You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.